Chapter 425. Ziqing looked at Eve helplessly. She knew that Eve had always held a strong enmity towards Fengwu. She had asked Eve many times, but the only answer she got was that she didn't like Fengwu and wanted Fengwu to die. She really didn't know what to say. Eve's personality was so extreme. If it wasn't for the fact that Eve's favorability towards her had increased to 100%, she definitely wouldn't want to interact with such an extreme person. This kind of person wasn't easy to control, and was too narrow-minded. If she accidentally hurt her glass heart, she would become the poisonous snake in the story of the farmer and the snake, and be bitten to death by her. Fortunately, she had the favorability system. Even if Eve's personality was problematic, it wasn't a problem to her. Compared to Eve, Ziqing discreetly sized up Rika. This Rika was actually a problem. She kept feeling that Rika seemed to have discovered something. Rika's favorability towards her didn't increase at all. It even dropped from 70 to around 60. What was going on? She had always treated Rika well. Although she didn't treat her as unreservedly as she treated Eve, she didn't treat her badly either. Why did her favorability increase so much? Could it be that she had discovered some secret? This guess made Ziqing's heart skip a beat. If that was the case, then this Rika couldn't be left alive. No matter if she had discovered something or not, it was abnormal for her favorability to drop so much. Perhaps she should find a chance to make her disappear forever. Rika didn't know that Ziqing already had the intention to kill her. She took a sip of red wine and let the aroma of the wine spread in her mouth. Her eyes slightly narrowed, as if she was enjoying the taste of the wine in her mouth. If you want to kill Fengwu without being punished by the school, I have an idea. Rika put down her wine glass and said casually, "What do you have in mind?" As expected, Eve's interest was piqued. She grabbed Rika's hand excitedly. "My method is both difficult and simple." Rika kept him in suspense. "Stop keeping me in suspense. Just say what you want to say." As expected, Eve was hopping mad. Since you don't want to be punished by the school, as long as she's no longer a student of Notre Dame du Starlight, everything will be solved. Eve's eyes lit up. "You mean you want her to break the school rules and be kicked out by the school?" But was this possible? It was not easy for her to make such a big mistake. What's so difficult about that? Doesn't the school have a rule that if you hurt a fellow student, you'll be punished by the school? And the severity of the punishment depends on how much damage the other party has suffered. We just have to create an accident and make her the murderer of a fellow student. At that time, she'll have no choice but to leave the school. Rika said with a cold smile. She also hated Fengwu very much in her heart. It was just that she didn't show it on her face like Eve did. Having someone who wanted Fengwu dead so badly was the best thing for her. This was practically the best weapon for her, wasn't it? If she used this weapon well, she could return all the pain and humiliation that Fengwu had inflicted on her. Rika still remembered how she was humiliated by a Jur's illusion because of Fengwu. "You're right. This is a great idea. Let's see how she'll die this time," Eve said excitedly. She looked at Rika with a much gentler gaze. As the saying goes, the enemy of an enemy is a friend. As long as someone could help her defeat Fengwu, Eve had always been friendly. Seeing this scene, Ziqing became even more determined to kill Rika. Rika was indeed a smart person. Unfortunately, this smart person was suspicious of her. In order to keep her secret, she had to think of a way to get rid of Rika without leaving a trace. Rika didn't know that because of her performance just now, Ziqing wanted to kill her even more. If she knew, who knew what kind of expression she would have? After eating, Rika returned to her original dormitory. The moment she entered, she saw Anika and Silda sitting together and eating snacks. "Rika, why are you back?" Anika exclaimed in disbelief. Even Silda was looking at her with a frown. He was very puzzled by Rika's return. Ever since Rika was humiliated by a Jur, she had been very close to Ziqing and the others. Some time ago, she even moved into Violet's dormitory and went in and out with Ziqing. For a long time, they could see Rika, Ziqing, and Eve together. Even Anika wasn't as close to her as before. They all thought that Rika would never come back. They didn't expect her to come back to the dormitory. What happened? Could it be that she had some conflict with Ziqing? Anika worriedly guessed the reason for Rika's return. She still had feelings for Rika. After all, they were very close friends in the first semester. Not only were they in the same dormitory, but they were also in the same class. They had always been close to each other in school. However, as her relationship with Zicheng and the others improved, Rika became more distant. I'm also a part of this dormitory. Why can't I come back? Rika said expressionlessly. Didn't you move into Zicheng's dormitory? Silda was also curious about the reason for her sudden return. Then I won't be able to move back here. Leaving this sentence behind, Rika turned around and went upstairs. Anika and Silda looked at each other, not knowing what to say. I'll go up and take a look. Annika was still quite worried about her friend. She wondered if her friend had encountered something difficult to solve. Go on. Remember to tell me firsthand when you come down, Silda said. 3 black lines appeared on Rika's forehead. Gossiping at a time like this. After Anika went upstairs, she knocked on Rika's door and entered Rika's room. Rika was sitting lazily behind the desk, scribbling in a notebook. Anika didn't know what she was writing. When Fengwu returned to the dormitory, it was almost evening. The sky was no longer bright, and was covered by a thin layer of black gauze. Fengwu had just opened the door when Silda pulled her to the side. Xiaowu, big news. Rika is back, she said mysteriously. Fengwu blinked in confusion. So what? Fengwu was confused. What was so surprising about Rika's return? She lived here anyway. Wasn't it normal for her to come back? Silda was really strange. Are you stupid? You know that because Ajur stood up for you last time, the two of you became enemies. She even moved into Eve's dormitory for so long, because she didn't want to see you. I'm sure she came back this time because of you. She didn't come with good intentions. Serd said with a look of disappointment on his face. Because of her? Because of her? Fengwu couldn't understand why Rika would come for her. She blinked in confusion. Chapter 426. Silda was speechless. Just as he was about to say something, Annika came down. Annika's expression was a little strange. She seemed to be in deep thought. Silda took 2 steps forward and grabbed Rika's hand. How is it? Did you get anything out of her? Annika was stunned. Rika didn't say anything to me, but I feel that she's weird. She seems to have something on her mind. Annika said worriedly. Don't worry. What could possibly happen to her? She's very close to Zicheng and Eve now. Even if she has something on her mind, her 2 good friends will definitely help her solve it. Silda said nonchalantly. If Rika had something on her mind, it would definitely be related to Fengwu. She was most likely up to no good. Is that so? Annika was still a little worried, but she didn't say anything else. Forget it. Let's not care about her. Let's talk about the competition. When the new semester started, the school organized an extreme survival competition. All the students from the Swordmaster faculty have to participate. Moreover, all the students from the upper and lower grades are placed in the same arena. It's too disadvantageous for us, the lower grades. I really don't know what the school is thinking. Why would they organize such an unfair competition? Serd complained. All the students from the Swordmaster faculty are going? Annika had heard about the competition. However, the mage faculty was voluntary. They could participate if they wanted to, and no one would force them to. It was the first time she heard about the compulsory participation of the Swordmaster faculty. That's right. Starting from the 2nd grade, all the grades above have to participate. It's too unfair for us, who have just entered the 2nd grade, to be placed together with those seniors. Another competition? Fengwu blinked her big eyes and asked Silda. Yeah. You just came back so you don't know. This time, the school organized an extreme survival competition. I heard that the top 10 students will be sent to a very dangerous special mission. This competition is to select talents for that mission. Special mission? Fengwu couldn't figure out what the mission was, so she didn't think too much about it. The 3 girls sat on the sofa and began to discuss the extreme survival competition. I heard that the mission is very dangerous. If you want to survive in that place, just strength isn't enough. You also need luck and a certain amount of survival skills. Anyway, the school organized a competition for that mission. No one knows what the mission is. We only know that if we succeed and get selected, the benefits are extraordinary. I heard that we have a chance to join the Star Hall. Annika's face filled with yearning when she mentioned the Star Hall. If you want to join the Star Temple, why don't you join the School of Theology? Those fellows in the School of Theology are either divine officers or saintesses after they graduate. Those are the lucky ones who directly join the Star Temple, Silda said. Annika said angrily, You think I don't want to? I went to the Star School when they were recruiting, but the teachers there said that I don't have divinity and can't communicate with the gods. They wouldn't accept me no matter what. Annika was very indignant at this point. She wanted to join the Star Hall since she was young, so she always aimed to become a saintess. She never thought that she would be rejected by the Star School because she didn't have divinity. In the end, she had no choice but to apply for the Notre Dame du Starlight. She felt very miserable when she thought about it. Then are you planning to participate in the extreme survival competition this time? Of course. I have to grab this opportunity no matter what. This might be the only chance in my life to join the Star Hall. Annika clenched her hands with determination. Fengwu remembered that she had a friend from the Star Hall. Was the Star Hall that amazing? Why did Rika want to go to the Star Hall so much? The Fengwu girl who wasn't a native couldn't understand at all. The people of this world worshipped and yearned for the Star Hall. A few days later, school started. The news of the extreme survival competition had already spread throughout the school. All the students were looking forward to the competition. In this atmosphere, the school suddenly issued a notice to punish a group of students. A total of 4 students were given major demerits. These 4 people were Zicheng, Feng Yinran, Mildy, and O'Brien. The 4 of them were given major demerits because they didn't listen to their captain's orders and acted on their own. Feng Yinran and the other 2 were a bit better. There were some students who didn't listen to their captain's orders before, but after they were given demerits, they became much more obedient. But what the hell was with releasing a monster? How much courage did one have to do something like that? It was a miracle that they weren't expelled by the school. Why do you think Zicheng released that monster? How would we know? I really couldn't tell. She's usually gentle and soft. You really can't judge a book by its cover. Isn't that right? That's why the more beautiful a woman is, the more different she looks. When choosing a woman, you should choose someone like me who looks the same. A chubby girl with freckles on her face said. Next to her, a group of boys immediately jeered. Zicheng walked past these students with a pale face. Mingxi really reported her. Fortunately, she always had a good impression in the teacher's eyes. She had already explained that it was because she didn't know that there was a monster suppressed inside, that she pulled out the suppressing demon sword. The school didn't have any evidence to prove that she knew that the suppressing demon sword was suppressing a demon general. This was why she was only given a major demerit. If it was proven that she knowingly committed a crime, she was afraid that she would immediately be expelled from the school. Eve saw that she suffered such a big grievance. How could she still stand there? She wanted to rush up and tear apart those people who were talking nonsense. Zicheng didn't want to provoke public anger at this time. He pulled Eve and didn't let her act rashly. The 2 of them quickly walked 2 steps away from this area. Zicheng's craze of pulling out the sword and releasing the demon hadn't passed yet. He didn't expect that another big thing would happen in the school. A student in the school was killed. The killer and the killed were both people on the demerit list. The one who died was O'Brien. The one who killed was Mildy. This murder case only happened for a day, but it caused a sensation in the entire school. Mildy and O'Brien, this fiancé couple, were relatively well known. Both of them were of noble birth. However, O'Brien's family was already going downhill. If Mildy didn't like O'Brien and asked her parents to help O'Brien's family wouldn't have had the chance to recover. Mildy's love for O'Brien could definitely make any man envious. A woman was willing to do everything for you, and even promote your family. This was simply the dream of many men. However, O'Brien had always been indifferent to Mildy. This made many girls feel that Mildy wasn't worth it. Mildy didn't have many female friends. Before she met O'Brien, Mildy also had some friends. However, because she suspected that they were interested in O'Brien, she alienated them. Chapter 427. Milty's love for O'Brien was as hot as the sun in July. No one would have thought that the 2 would end their love in such a way. Oh my God, Milty really killed O'Brien. Didn't she love that man very much? Why did she kill him? How would I know? Could it be that the love was so deep that she cut him off? Could it be that O'Brien had another girlfriend behind Milty's back and wanted to break up with her? Milty couldn't take it, so she killed O'Brien. It's possible. With Milty's personality, it's possible. Some of the people who knew Milty and O'Brien had come up with several scripts about the love and grudges between the two. You're all wrong. Let me tell you the truth. A female voice said mysteriously. You know, everyone was doubtful. Please, I know that my brother isn't here. Jariet was in the same traveling group as O'Brien. I guarantee that no one knows better than me about the love and hate between the two of them. The person who spoke was actually Jariet's sister. After Jariet came back to school, he chatted with his sister a little more. He even used the love triangle between O'Brien and the other two as a negative example to educate his sister. If he knew that his sister had spread the words about him educating his sister, he would probably give her a good spanking. That's right, something like this happened right after returning from a trip. Something must have happened while you were traveling. Quick, tell me what happened. The onlookers felt that what she said made sense. Hence, they gave her a seat and let her stand in the middle to talk. Jariet's sister proudly walked to the middle of the crowd and described the love triangle between Feng Yanran, O'Brien, and Milty vividly. It was as if she had seen it with her own eyes and listened to Jariet's sister's story. Feng Yanran had turned from a new goddess to a shameless mistress. She had caused the death of one of the two fiancés. Who knew what would happen to the other? No matter what the relationship between the two was, O'Brien was a student of Notre Dame du Starlight. The school didn't allow students to kill each other. Milty killed a student of Notre Dame du Starlight. She would definitely be expelled from the school. Before that, she would be locked in the reflection room to reflect. The reflection room wasn't just a place for reflection. There were all kinds of dangers inside. Staying in there for a day felt like a year. There was once a senior who killed his classmate out of jealousy. As a result, he was punished and sent to the reflection room for 10 years. After 10 years, he would be expelled from school. Back then, when that senior came out, he had already been tortured to the point of insanity. His entire body no longer resembled a human. His appearance was simply terrifying. Since then, no one wanted to enter the reflection room. They all regarded entering the reflection room as a dangerous path. Because Feng Yanran interfered and caused her fiancé to fall in love with someone else, Milty angrily killed her scumbag fiancé. However, she paid for it with her own life. As a mistress, the destroyer of Milty and O'Brien's relationship, Feng Yanran didn't suffer any harm in this incident. This made most of the students in the school dissatisfied with Feng Yanran. The students who hated her soon accounted for more than half of the students in the school. This was an unimaginable blow to Feng Yanran, who was popular with boys as soon as she entered the school. Feng Yanran suddenly became a rat on the street. She was almost killed by those girls who didn't like her. Her life could be described as an abyss of suffering. Less than 2 days after Milty killed her fiancé, another big incident happened in the school. Milty committed suicide. When the news came out, the whole school was in an uproar. No one thought that Milty would commit suicide. How much did she love O'Brien? She was willing to commit suicide for him. Milty's death caused a great uproar. However, the school had just started and 2 students had died. For this matter, a teacher was specially sent to investigate. In the end, the results of the investigation showed that Milty did commit suicide. There were no traces of murder. This incident ended with Milty's death. The relationship between Milty's family and O'Brien's family was completely broken. Since then, the 2 families have become mortal enemies. I heard that Milty left a suicide note before she died. The suicide note explained how she killed her fiancé and why she wanted to commit suicide. Ajur and Fengwu sat together in the student cafeteria, enjoying the delicious food on the 3rd floor. Why did she want to commit suicide? O'Brien didn't like her. She could have just found someone who liked her. Master also said that feelings can't be forced. Forcing a relationship won't lead to happiness. Fengwu took a bite of barbecued meat and looked at Ajur with a serious face. Probably because she loved him too deeply. Milty's character was a bit extreme. She valued love more than anything else. She didn't have any dignity in front of O'Brien. A smart woman wouldn't put herself in such a low position. Ajur didn't have any good feelings towards Milty. A crazy woman who went crazy for love was simply a lunatic. Xiao Wu, you can't be like this in the future. No matter how much you like Senior Mingxi, you can't be like Milty. Ajur took the opportunity to educate her. Fengwu nodded obediently. She wasn't Milty. How could she be like Milty? Milty's and O'Brien's deaths were spread around the school for a few days. That was because the extreme survival competition had started accepting applications. Other than the swordsman department, there were also applications from the mage department, pharmacist department, music department, alchemy department, and formation department. There were many applicants from the other departments. Everyone was aiming for the 10 spots to enter the Star Hall. The Star Hall rarely recruited outsiders. This was a rare opportunity to enter the Star Hall. As long as one had the heart, no one would be willing to give it up. The extreme survival competition this time was divided into a team competition and an individual competition. The team competition consisted of 10 people in a group, while the individual competition only counted the results. The competition was carried out in the virtual realm. The arena was simulated by the virtual realm. It was a 100% realistic competition. The fiery and tea-like sign-up activities made the shadow brought by the deaths of Enmildi and the others disappear a lot. As a member of the swordsman department, Fengwu didn't need to register. She just needed to participate in the competition. Ajur wasn't interested in the spot to enter the Notre Dame du Starlight. He didn't register at all. Zicheng, Eve and Irene had already registered. Zicheng wasn't interested in the spot to enter the Star Hall. She was only interested in the legendary special mission. What kind of mission would make the school spend so much effort to prepare? She thought that she would find out. Needless to say, Irene would also participate. The time to snatch the female lead's opportunity had arrived. The Heart of Wood. This time's mission was related to the Heart of Wood. Irene herself had wood elemental magic talent. When the time came for her to obtain the Heart of Wood, her strength would definitely rise to another level. Chapter 428. In order to get the Heart of Wood, she had to get into the top 10 in this competition no matter what. However, this competition was not easy. It was a test of her survivability and adaptability. Although it was a little difficult, she was confident that she would get into the top 10. There were many people who were as determined as Irene. Everyone wanted to get into the top 10. As for what the special mission was, it was not that important. As long as they could get the chance to enter the Star Hall, it did not matter what the mission was. Tianya, this is your chance to show off. No one in the Swordmaster department is your match. Arguros elbowed Tianya and smiled a little wretchedly. Tianya did not even look at him. He focused on wiping the long sword in his hand with the white cloth in his hand. His attitude was serious, as if he was doing something very important. Stop fooling around. Have you registered? I plan to show off my skills in this competition, Ruglis said eagerly. Of course. Arguros patted his chest proudly. Oh right, is Mingxi going? Ruglis suddenly asked. Of course he is. He has already registered. This time, our whole team will go together. Elena will go too. Let's see who can stop us from getting into the top 10. Arguros was very confident in the overall strength of their team. Other than Mingxi team, there were many other teams that participated in the competition together. Although the teams were randomly grouped, they might be lucky enough to be grouped together. Amidst the cheering, the Extreme Route Survival Competition finally began in the virtual realm. Good morning, everyone. It's now 8 o'clock in the morning. As a 7th grade senior, I, Tamansha, will be the one to announce the live report of our temple's Extreme Survival Challenge competition. I believe everyone has already recognized the person beside me. Let us welcome the Vice President. Following Teras's agitated words, thunderous applause rang out. Fuck! It really is the Vice President. The Vice President is actually here to be the host? I'm not dreaming, am I? The Vice Principal sat on the stage and waved at the students below. In the school in the Mirage, a magic screen appeared in midair. On the screen, the Vice Principal and Teras's faces were very clear. Even the corner of the Vice Principal's mouth, which was hidden under his white beard, was clearly shown. Outside the school, a large group of people had gathered to watch the fun. These people were not Notre Dame du Starlight's people. They were leaning against the wall and the gate, watching the activities of Notre Dame du Starlight with great interest. This year's Extreme Survival Challenge will be divided into a team competition and an individual competition. Now, our academy's teachers will teleport all students into the arena. After entering the arena, please memorize the rules. If you are found to have broken the rules, you will immediately be disqualified. Tamancha pretended to blink playfully, which immediately caused many boys below the stage to howl. Passing through the door of light, all the participating students of the school arrived at a spacious square. On the square, there were all kinds of survival tools. On the stage, a teacher explained the rules of the team competition to the students. The team competition consisted of 10 people in a team. The whole team had to reach the finish line to win the competition. If one person did not reach the finish line, the whole team would be disqualified. The teams were randomly formed. Before the competition began, the main god of the mirage, or in other words, the weapon spirit, would announce the names of the teams. The names were all randomly written by the main god of the mirage. It was absolutely fair. Of course, it was very likely that there would be serious discrepancies in the team list made by the Lord God. However, luck was also a kind of strength. If one was unlucky and was placed in a weak team, one could only say that they were a little unlucky and could not blame anyone. Before forming a team, all the contestants had to do was to pick out what they needed the most from the large pile of outdoor daily necessities and bring it with them. Each person could bring 5 items that they deemed necessary. They could choose less, but they were not allowed to choose more. Fengwu chose a tent in the wilderness and a magic water purifying tool. The magic water purifying tool was able to purify water. In the real world, a magic water purifying tool like this would cost a fortune. It could only be mass-produced in a virtual world like the Mirage. Apart from the tent and the magic water purifying tool, she also chose a flint and a dagger. Finally, she asked for an iron pot, the kind used for cooking. Fengwu was the first one to pick out all 5 items. Many people still didn't know which one to pick out right away. Most of them chose flints, some chose tents, and even more chose weapons. Because magic and do-chi were prohibited in the competition space, weapons like magic tents and magic swords would not appear at all. The items on the square were ordinary weapons. There were sabers, swords, and daggers. There were also bows and axes. There were even wooden sticks. However, not many people chose wooden sticks. Most of the boys chose sabers or swords. Some of the younger students chose swords or daggers. None of them chose wooden sticks. After choosing the weapons they needed, the main god announced the names of the teams. Fengwu was in the same group as a few boys and girls that she did not know. Among them, there were 5th-year seniors and 2nd-year juniors like Fengwu. In short, the ranks of the team were uneven. Furthermore, the way the seniors looked at Fengwu and the others was as if they were dragging them down. There were 6 boys and 4 girls in the group. Among the 6 boys, there was a 5th-year student, 2 4th-year students, and 3 3rd-year students. Among the 4 girls, there was a 4th-year and a 3rd-year student. The remaining 2 were Fengwu and a 2nd-year magician girl. This kind of team was not strong, but it was not weak either. Most of the participants were from the Swordmaster department. There were not many magicians. Their entire team only had a 2nd-year magician girl. Apart from the Swordmaster department, there were also 3 people from the Alchemy department, Music department, and Alchemy department. There were not many people in the entire team who could fight. If they were to encounter a battle, they did not know if they could survive. The only 5th-year student present, Ober, scratched his head in annoyance. This kind of team was really hard to inspire confidence in. Since the team was formed, they had no choice but to go. Everyone greeted each other and began to introduce themselves. I am Shinda, a 4th-year Swordmaster. I am Karon, a 4th-year Alchemy department student. I am Majan, a 3rd-year Swordmaster. My hobby is cooking. You can leave the cooking work to me in the future. Majan was a very cheerful boy. He laughed and said, I am Cabe, a 3rd-year Swordmaster. I am Shandy, a 3rd-year Music department student. The girl named Shandy said shyly. I am Anma, a fourth-year potions department student. Hello, seniors. I am Kamir, a second-year magician. I am Fengwu, a second-year swordmaster. Chapter 429. I'm Fengwu, a second-year swordsman. I'm Bowen, a third-year mage. I'm Ober, a fifth-year swordsman. After a round of self-introduction, they finally understood each other's abilities and names. After the self-introduction, everyone reported what they had chosen. The 10 of them all chose weapons and flints. Since they couldn't use magic or combat energy, flints were a necessity. About 7 out of the 10 of them chose flints. Only Fengwu chose a tent. Seeing the tent she chose, everyone immediately labeled her as a hindrance. After seeing Fengwu's iron pot, she was completely despised by the others. What was the use of an iron pot in a tent? If you were tired, you could just find a tree or a cave to sleep. Why would you need a tent? It was a waste of opportunity. An iron pot was even more useless. Who would choose to use an iron pot during a competition? It was inexplicable. Fengwu girl, who didn't know that she was despised, was now in a little trouble. Because this competition didn't allow the participants to bring their own storage equipment. The storage equipment they were wearing was the same as the ones prepared by the school. A storage equipment had 20 storage slots, which could only store 20 different kinds of things. Because they had already used up 5 storage slots to choose the things they wanted to bring into the competition, each of them had 15 storage slots to use. And in these 15 storage slots, they had to go to another area to choose the food they wanted to bring with them. Each of them could choose 3 days' worth of food to bring into the competition. After the food was finished, they had to find other edible food in the competition venue. There were many poisonous plants in the competition venue, which meant that they couldn't choose the wrong one. Once they chose the wrong one, they would be poisoned. If they were unlucky, they would be directly poisoned to death and be eliminated from the competition. Dying in the competition venue wouldn't cause any damage to the mental power, because the competition venue was a dungeon. Dying in a dungeon was just being eliminated from the dungeon. It was different from dying in a dungeon. The food provided by the school was very sufficient. There were meat, bread, biscuits, and even steamed buns and steamed buns. Most of the people here chose bread and dried meat, along with a few bags of fresh water. As for water, each person was only allowed to bring 3 water bags. After drinking 3 water bags, they had to find a way to get drinkable water. If they couldn't find any water, their body would be too thirsty and their stamina would drop. If they couldn't find any water, they would be disqualified from the competition due to severe dehydration and would be kicked out of the competition. Fengwu was the only one in the team who had chosen to use the water purifying equipment. Luckily, the others were a lot friendlier toward her because of her contribution. Fengwu picked out jerky meat buns and steamed buns. After bringing 3 days' worth of food, she also took a water bag. Everything was ready. After all the students had made their choices, they would be sent to the challenge arena in groups. According to the rules, they had to rely on the combined efforts of their team members to survive on the field and find the hidden school emblem on the field. Every team of 10 members had to find one emblem in order to pass the test. Missing one emblem was not an option. It made the competition even more difficult. The challenge arena they would be entering was a spacious space with harsh living conditions. Every minute they spent in it would be more dangerous. Not only would they have to face the harsh living conditions in the challenge arena, they would also have to face the danger of their own kind. They were allowed to steal the badges. If they were unlucky enough to stumble into a super strong team, they could easily be wiped out. Everyone, we can see that the participants are ready. Let's invite the teachers to send these adorable juniors to the challenge arena. Tamancha's elegant voice appeared once again. Soon, the screen showed the students falling from their original positions. It was as if a hole had suddenly appeared in the ground. They all fell into the hole without any preparation. Wow! I realized that our teachers are quite good at playing pranks. These participants didn't even know what happened, and they fell into the hole. Tamancha said playfully. The students who weren't participating in the challenge arena had already entered the mirage to watch the challenge arena. Hearing Tamancha's playful words, They all smiled knowingly. Vice Principal, can you tell us more about the environment the participants will face? I heard that the extreme survival challenge this time is to test the students' ability to survive in harsh environments. May I ask what the purpose of this challenge is? Learn from others. As our students grow older and stronger, they will face all kinds of difficulties. If we are in a place where we can't use magic or combat aura, we will become ordinary people who don't know anything. When that happens, we will know how to survive and think of a way to escape from danger. The purpose of this competition is to train our students' ability to deal with crises, survive in the wild, resist stress, and the vice principal spoke at length, but the students below the stage didn't buy it. Didn't you say that this competition was changed because you wanted to choose the candidates for the special mission? Don't mention the vice principal's nonsense. If this was really the reason, then this competition should have been held thousands of years ago. Why would we wait until now? The vice principal is getting better at talking nonsense. How can there be such a grand reason? As expected of the vice principal, his ability to talk nonsense is getting better and better. Who is it? Who threw a hidden weapon at me? My ass. Which bastard kicked me? The teachers below the stage were all speechless as they looked at the students who were looking for the culprit. They then looked at the vice principal who was still sitting on the stage and bragging about this competition as if it was healthy and good. It was impossible to tell that he had secretly taught these students a lesson. Brats, you are too careless. Don't you know that the vice principal is extraordinarily strong? He doesn't need to listen carefully to hear what you are saying. What's the difference between this and speaking ill of the vice principal in front of him? Don't you know that the vice principal is famous for being petty? If anyone offends him, he will openly make life difficult for you for a year. After the vice principal's explanation, Tamantia clearly didn't dare to ask the vice principal any more questions. All right. Thank you, vice principal, for giving us such a detailed explanation. Next, we will ask the teachers to help us switch the screen back to the arena. Everyone can watch the performance of each participant through the light screen. Chapter 430. All right. Thank you, Vice Principal, for giving us such a detailed explanation. Next, we'll ask the teacher to help us switch the screen back to the arena. Everyone can watch the performance of each contestant through the light screen. We can now see that the contestants are safely on their way. Following a series of screams, figures fell from the sky one after another, landing on the ground from various positions. Loud bangs rang out. If they were in the real world outside, they would have most likely been seriously injured by the fall. The place where they landed was a desolate and dilapidated small mountain village. The buildings in the mountain had already decayed to the point that they were in a bad state. From time to time, a few skinny rats would run across the village, seemingly a little panicked by the sudden intrusion of humans. Fengwu controlled her body and successfully landed on the ground. She did not suffer any injuries. Although all her strength was sealed in this place, her body's memory was still there. Fengwu could easily complete this landing by relying on her memory of moves and her ability to control her body. Other than Fengwu, the fifth-year Ober, and the fourth-year Swordmaster Xinda, everyone else suffered some injuries when they landed. For a moment, cries of pain rang out everywhere. However, after a few groans, these people quickly adjusted their state of mind and gathered together, sizing up the place where they landed. There was no one in the village, and the houses were almost uninhabitable. The damage was very serious, and it was unlikely that there would be anything to eat in such a house. They did not see anyone else near them, and it seemed that the venue this time was very large. They believed that it would not be so easy for them to meet the other teams. Haha, look at them falling one by one. This is so interesting. Hehe. Fortunately, I was smart enough not to sign up. Otherwise, with my physique, I might have fallen to my death. What kind of scene is this? Why does it look so miserable? I don't see any natives, only dilapidated houses and malnourished plants. The contestants did not know that their performance on the arena was directly projected on the light screen. Not only were there images on the light screen, but even their voices could be heard clearly. Because the contestants were in different places, the light screen could not watch their landing methods one by one. It could only select some people to focus on. Huh. Junior brother Mingxi and junior brother Tianya were assigned to the same team. Isn't this team very powerful? Tamancha gasped in disbelief. She had never expected to see two heavyweights in the same team. Tianya had successfully become a fifth-year student, and Mingxi had also been promoted to sixth year. Those who were familiar with Notre Dame du Starlight knew that the further one went, the slower it would be to level up. This was because the difficulty of the final exam would increase as well. If one's ability was not good enough, one would have to study for 3 or 4 years in just one grade. By the time one graduated, one would already be middle-aged. Of course, if you are sure that you can't be promoted to the 7th grade, you can also apply for early graduation. The school will still give you a diploma, but it will be different from a normal graduation certificate. Mingxi and Tianya had always been geniuses in the school. Both of them were influential figures in the school. If there were no accidents, they would definitely graduate normally. Moreover, they wouldn't need to repeat their studies. It's true. This team is pretty lucky. But the other teams aren't that bad either. Many of them are led by 7th-year seniors. No matter how strong Mingxi and Tianya are, can they be stronger than 7th-year seniors? I don't believe it. The people who appeared on the screen were the members of Mingxi's new team. Mingxi and Tianya were pretty lucky. The only female in the team who had a combat profession was also a pharmacist. Pharmacists were very helpful to them. When they were injured, they could rely on the pharmacist's ability to refine medicine. Unlike Mingxi team, most of the other teams were not so lucky. For example, Elena was assigned to a weak team. She was so angry that she almost vomited blood. The various conflicts between these teams, because of the strength of the members assigned to them, were shown on the screen. However, the people on the screen did not know about these. Fengwu's team circled around the village. In the end, they didn't find anyone. Fengwu saw a group of Mingxi's starving rats run up to her and look at her pitifully. She took out a steamed bun from her storage space and fed it to them. Ah, Senior Ober, look, Fengwu is actually feeding these disgusting rats with food. A female soprano voice suddenly cut through the sky. The female magician of the same year as Fengwu, Kemi, pointed at Fengwu with a shocked expression. Her exaggerated appearance made people who didn't know better think that Fengwu had done something that angered the heavens. How can you use food to feed rats? We only have 3 days' worth of food to eat. If you finish your food in advance, don't expect the rest of us to share it with you, Kemi said righteously. Many people nodded in agreement. They didn't like Fengwu's practice of wasting food at will. This is my own food. I won't ask you to eat it, Fengwu said, looking at Kemi seriously. The translation of her meaning was, I'm feeding my own food. Even if I don't have enough food, I won't ask you to eat it. So whether I feed the rats with food or not is none of your business. After understanding the meaning, Kemi's eyes turned red with anger. You said it yourself, don't regret it when the time comes. Kemi turned around and left in a huff. The others didn't have the idea to meddle in other people's business. In any case, it was fine as long as she didn't ask them to share her food. As for her food, they didn't care who she shared it with. Fengwu and Shijin didn't like animals like rats very much, and usually had little contact with them. But these rats looked so pitiful that Fengwu couldn't turn a blind eye to them. Besides, she wanted to get some information from them, so she still had to give them the steamed bun. The little rat and several other little friends who smelled the steamed bun ran over and ate it together. Finally, they regained their strength. The rats here were polite and thanked Fengwu very kindly. Thank you, little beauty. If you hadn't fed us, we probably would have died like those humans. When the word died came out of the little rat's mouth, there was obviously a lingering fear. Are all the people in this village dead? Fengwu asked. They died a long time ago, no one is alive, the little rat said. Why did they die? Fengwu asked, puzzled. Because of the plague, of course. The whole village died of the plague. The city lord gave an order to lock up all the infected people in the village and let them fend for themselves. Fortunately, we were smart enough to hide at that time. Otherwise, I'm afraid even we would have died here. Chapter 431. From the Little Mouse, Fengwu learned the truth about why the village was abandoned. What was the epidemic? Of course, Fengwu knew about it. Before she transmigrated, Fengwu had heard her uncles and sisters-in-law in the village talk about the epidemic when she went down the mountain. Every time they talked about the epidemic, their expressions would change. At that time, Fengwu was curious and went home to ask her master what the epidemic was. Her master said that it was a disease that was highly contagious. If you accidentally contracted it, you would slowly die without any effective treatment. What is this place? There is no one here. Where did everyone go? Cabe circled around the area. Other than some spiders, mice, and cockroaches, he could not find anything. Let's see if we can find the school emblem, Charon said as he opened a half-broken door. It shouldn't be here. It won't be so easy for us to find it, and Ma said without much hope. Most people agreed with her. Since this place was used as the starting point, there was no way they would place the important item here. Although they thought so, they still didn't want to give up any hope. One by one, they began to search for their own targets, wanting to see if they could find anything. There was an epidemic here. We should leave this place. Fengwu knew that the epidemic was highly contagious. Although the village had been abandoned for a long time, they would be in danger if the virus survived. Epidemic? How did you know? Everyone exclaimed and asked at the same time. Some were suspicious, while others did not believe it. It said so, Fengwu said with a serious face as she pointed at the little mouse that was happily munching on a steamed bun in front of her. You can understand the language of animals? Ober asked with surprise. Understanding animal language was not a big deal. Most adult magical beasts could speak human language. Sacred beasts were born with the ability to speak. Therefore, the ability to understand the language of animals was considered to be rather useless among the talent abilities. However, no matter how useless a skill was, it still depended on when to use it. Now that all of their abilities were sealed, if they could borrow Fengwu's ability to talk to animals, it would definitely make it easier for them to complete this mission. Understanding animal language? Wasn't that a type of innate ability? Was this girl a natural talent? Although they were quite surprised that Fengwu had an innate ability, they weren't too jealous, because the ability to understand the language of animals wasn't a good ability among the innate abilities. Instead, it was a relatively useless ability. Because this ability was of little value to them, of course, it wouldn't arouse their jealousy. Yes, Fengwu nodded. Her master had told her that her ability to understand animal language was not a big deal in this world. She did not have to worry about others knowing about it. Therefore, this time she did not hide anything. Fengwu answered honestly. Hearing Fengwu's affirmative answer, everyone was surprised, but they didn't think it was a big deal. After all, it wasn't a big deal. Is there really a plague here? Xinda frowned as he studied the village. Yes, Fengwu nodded again. Are you serious? There's an epidemic here? Let's get out of here. It's too dangerous, even though this is just a tournament dungeon. However, the diseases in this instance dungeon can still cause them to fall sick. Although the febrile disease doesn't have much effect on those who have cultivated combat aura and magic, it's definitely a disease that can cause despair to ordinary people. You're right, Senior Ober. We need to leave this place as soon as possible. Because of Fengwu's natural talent, no one suspected that she was lying. After all, such a lie would not benefit her in any way. Fengwu, ask it which way we can leave this place, Ober said to Fengwu. Fengwu asked the little mouse this question. The little mouse immediately answered, but, you want to leave this place? The little mouse sounded very worried. Yes, Fengwu said to the little mouse. The way out of this village has been sealed by the mayor. If you want to leave, you can only leave through the forest in the east. But there are many monsters in the forest. If you go in, you may not be able to come out alive. The little mouse thought of the villagers who tried to escape through the forest in the east. None of them came back alive. They were probably all dead in the forest. Fengwu told everyone what the little mouse said. No one thought that there was a mayor in this dungeon, and the mayor had sealed the way out. Of course, they would not completely believe the words of a little mouse. So they sent people to look for a way out. But when they came back, they said that there was a powerful seal around them. There was no way out. Fengwu's team had no choice but to go through the forest in the east. The dangerous forest that the little mouse said was the only way out of the village. At this time, the images of each team were perfectly displayed on the screen. Because all the contestants did not land at the same place. Some fell directly from the sky into the trees, and some fell into the water, or the nest of a powerful monster. The landing point was actually very important. If you were unlucky, it was very likely that you would be killed by a magical beast before you could even see your surroundings clearly. Fengwu and the others were not very lucky when they landed in a fever-affected village. However, they were much luckier than the others who landed in the same village as them, because they discovered the truth of the village at the first moment and left the landing point as quickly as possible. Vice President, I want to ask, is there anything different about this village? I saw you smile when you found out that a team was planning to go into the house to collect the loot. Is there some kind of trap waiting for these contestants? Tamantia was very observant. When she found the vice president's expression was not right, she immediately pointed at the image on the screen and asked. Actually, this village is also a test for the contestants. As long as the contestants enter the houses of the villagers and stay in the village for an hour, they will immediately be infected by the epidemic. The epidemic is very contagious. As long as one of the team members is infected, the other team members will be infected if they stay in the house for more than half an hour without knowing. Chapter 432. Unless they can find a cure for the epidemic disease in the dungeon, otherwise, they will be afflicted with a state of continuous loss of HP and weakness. If they can't find a cure before their HP is depleted, they will die due to the continuous loss of HP and weakness and be eliminated from the competition. The vice principal stroked his white beard and said with a radiant smile, "Are you serious? That's too much. At the very least, they should hang a sign in the village. Otherwise, who would know that there are people in that village who have the epidemic disease?" Many of the students who heard the vice president's explanation started to discuss in whispers. That's right. That's too difficult. Vice President, did you hear that? Some of the students are saying that they should hang a sign in the village. Otherwise, it will be too difficult. After all, no one knows anything about the situation in the village. Don't you think it's unfair to our contestants to release the epidemic virus? Tamantia sat on the stage and smiled charmingly. There won't be any unfairness. Because in every village, the main god has already released some information about the village. Once the contestants enter the village, they will be tested on their observation skills and perception of danger. If they are not observant enough, they will not be able to discover the information left behind by the main god. Then they will be eliminated. We've already made it clear before the start of the competition that this is a survival challenge. The one who survives to the end is the winner. If you want to survive in that kind of environment, you can't just rely on luck. We're mainly looking at your overall ability, the vice president said with a smile. He did not feel pressured at all. I see. Thank you, Vice President, for your explanation. Next, we will continue to watch the competition. Oh, there are already teams that have left the village. Don't they want to look around the village to see if there are any school badges? Tamantia was talking about Fengwu and the others. In the image, they had just come out of the village and were walking toward the eastern forest. The eastern forest was a very strange place. It was because there were all kinds of strange things growing in the forest. There were also some fruits that had never been seen before. They have entered the forest. Vice President, are there any traps in this forest as well? Tamantia asked with interest. This forest is actually a large labyrinth. We've already asked the Lord God to cast many illusions in this labyrinth. Now that the contestants have become ordinary people, it will be very difficult for them to walk out of this huge labyrinth. In order to prevent the contestants from getting food too easily, 80% of the plants in the forest are poisonous. The food they have is only enough for them to survive for 3 days. After 3 days, they will have to distinguish which plants are edible and which are not. It is a very difficult choice. Many of the plants we've asked the Lord God to choose are species that have gone extinct in ancient times, or they're plants that the Lord God created according to his own ideas. They don't exist in reality at all. This will be a huge hindrance to the contestants in finding food. Wow! That's insane! 80% of unknown poisonous plants. In other words, there is an 80% chance that they will all be poisoned to death in the forest. The vice principal is too much. I think it's already very difficult to find some uncommon plants in that forest. Even pharmacists can't memorize the entire plant encyclopedia. Even they have to flip through the book when they need it. That's right, the vice principal is too much. I think it's already very difficult to find some uncommon plants in that forest. Now the contestants have to choose which of the extinct plants are poisonous, which are not, and which don't exist at all. Does he have to be so insane? The students below the stage started a heated discussion about how insane the vice president was. Tamancha looked at the calm vice president. Don't speak anymore, poor children. Don't you know how vengeful your vice president is? If you continue speaking, the vice president will punish you. Even the teachers who were watching by the side cast a few pitiful gazes at the young people who were still in the middle of the discussion. Little fellows, you are indeed too young. Don't you know that you can't speak ill of the vice president in front of him? At this moment, Feng Wu and the others still didn't know what was waiting for them in the forest. Feng Wu and the others walked into the insane forest. After entering the forest, they quickly discovered a problem. These plants are so strange. I have never seen them before. And Ma, can you tell what kind of plants these are? Asked the only fifth-year student, Ober, who was also their team leader. These? And Ma walked in front and carefully observed. In front of her were rows of colorful plants. The colors were very bright and beautiful. These beautiful plants were very unfamiliar to them. They were all species that they had never seen before. These seem to be plants that have gone extinct in ancient times. Everyone be careful. These plants are highly poisonous. Don't touch them. And Ma said seriously, highly poisonous. Upon hearing that they were poisonous, the girls who wanted to pluck some of these beautiful plants to take a look immediately stood further away. Even the boys took a few steps back. After all, who didn't want to come into contact with poisonous plants? Everyone be careful. This place is too strange. There are many plants that even I don't recognize. Don't touch them. And Ma frowned as she looked at the plants that she had never seen before. Even you don't recognize them. Senior on Ma, you're a genius of the fourth-year pharmacist department. How come even you don't recognize these plants? Kemi's eyes widened in disbelief as she spoke. That's right, and Ma, even you don't recognize these? Ober looked at the plants that he didn't recognize and began to worry. If even and Ma didn't recognize these plants, what would they do when the food ran out in 3 days? This was a serious problem that most people had not thought of. Only Ma and Ober had thought of it. And Ma shook her head heavily. As a fourth-year pharmacist genius, she was confident that she could even memorize the complete encyclopedia of medicinal herbs. However, she didn't recognize many of the plants here. She suspected that these plants were most likely extinct and were rarely recorded in the books. This made their competition even more difficult. If they couldn't find food in 3 days, they would most likely starve to death in this place or eat the wrong poisonous plant and be poisoned to death. However, they didn't want to starve to death or be poisoned to death. Chapter 433. The issue of food had become a huge problem for everyone in Feng Wu's team. Fortunately, they still had 3 days to find food. The team members began to look for a way out of the forest. Originally, no one thought that leaving the forest would be a difficult task. However, after walking for 5 hours and realizing that there was no change in the surrounding environment, no one thought so anymore. Feng Wu quietly listened to the sound in the wind. Look, these guys are back. The Lord God is indeed the best. These guys didn't even know that they had entered the Lord God's maze, said a mangrove tree with red fruits proudly. I knew that these fish-lipped humans wouldn't be able to get out, said a big tree with purple fruits. The Lord God is mighty and domineering. The Lord God is indeed the best. Let these fish-lipped humans wander around here for the rest of their lives. A bunch of flowers, plants, and fruit trees were gloating over their misfortune. These little guys were all very interested in the humans who had just entered the forest. Ever since they were moved here by the Lord God, They had never seen any humans. Now that they finally saw traces of humans, of course they were happy. In the ethereal realm, other than some small monsters that constantly respawned in the wild, boss-level monsters and some plants, most of them had self-consciousness. In the ethereal realm, there was a set of rules. The excited words of these little guys entered Fengwu's ears without missing a word. She curiously looked at these little guys a few times. She felt that they were very cute. When she was in the tomb of the sea god, Fengwu had seen many plants. However, those little guys did not have self-consciousness. When she saw plants with self-consciousness, Fengwu felt very close to them. We're back again. Damn it, what's going on? I think we might have fallen into some kind of formation. If we don't find a way out quickly, all of us will die here. The others had the same feeling. There were poisonous plants everywhere. Moreover, they had fallen into a formation. If they could not find a way out and solve the problem of food, all of them would be in great danger. As time passed, and they were still trapped in this place, everyone started to feel a little impatient. Everyone found a place to sit down and eat their own rations. They didn't bring a lot of rations, so they only ate their own portion. Because they couldn't find the source of the food, they could only leave as much as possible. This way, they could ensure that there would be a certain amount of food to eat 3 days later. Fengwu's team was not the only one who had fallen into such a crisis. Many other teams had fallen into the traps that the school had prepared for them for one reason or another. These traps were very interesting and unexpected. If they were not careful, they might be eliminated. In a short period of time, some unlucky ones had already been eliminated. According to the rules of the team competition, only when everyone in the team cleared the stage together would the challenge be considered complete. If not, even if one person was eliminated, the entire team would be eliminated. After Jane had something to eat, the team set off again. It was already afternoon. They had to find a way to leave before nightfall, because the danger at night might be much greater than during the day. Therefore, at night, the team members did not plan to continue on their journey. Instead, they wanted to find a relatively safe place to rest before nightfall. After walking for another hour, they still couldn't get out. After an hour of observation, Fengwu also wanted to ask the plants for directions, but it was useless. The task they received from the Lord God was to trap the humans who entered this place. Even if Fengwu made them feel very close to her, they would not disobey the Lord God's orders. After all, in this world, the Lord God was the ruler. If they did not disobey the Lord God's orders, these plants could still provide some help to Fengwu. However, Fengwu wanted them to tell her the way out. This was completely against the Lord God's wishes. Therefore, although these plants wanted to help Fengwu, they still rejected her request. Unable to find a way out, Fengwu was a little disheartened. However, she was not angry at these plants for rejecting her. To Fengwu, these plants were very cute. Even if she was rejected, she would not be angry. The sky soon darkened. Fengwu and the others found a place to build a fire. They wanted to make do for the night. Fengwu took out the tent she had chosen, and then quickly set it up. There was everything in the tent. There were pillows and a quilt. It should be very warm to sleep in. There was a chill in the night air. In the past, they had the protection of Do Qi and magic. No matter how cold the wind was, they could still use magic and Do Qi to create a protective shield to keep the wind outside. But now, everyone had become ordinary people. When the cold night wind blew on their bodies, they could only try to pull their clothes up a little higher and move their bodies closer to the fire. When the other 9 saw Fengwu take out the tent, they all looked at Fengwu with envy. When they had first started to choose their belongings for the competition, they had all thought that the tent would not be of much use. But when night fell, they realized that the tent was very useful. At the very least, it could keep their bodies warm. Fengwu, it's too cold. Why don't we girls squeeze in together? Kimmy jumped to Fengwu's side and said coquettishly. Kimmy was born with a beautiful and cute face. She was also a student of the mage department. Because of her talent in magic, she had been spoiled by her family. Although she looked like she was discussing with Fengwu, she had already determined that Fengwu would not dare to refuse. They only had 4 girls in total. What right did Fengwu have to monopolize such a tent by herself? When Kimmy was like this, She completely did not think that she had chosen these items. What did it have to do with monopolizing something that others had chosen? Kimmy, forget it. Don't make things difficult for Junior Fengwu. This tent can only fit 3 people at most. We have 4 girls. How can it fit? Sandy was also very jealous of that tent. But she also knew that it could not fit 4 people. At most, it could only fit 3 people. Kimmy said unconcernedly, "So what? Fengwu is from the Swordmaster department. Her body must be very good. Me and the other 2 seniors are not students of the Swordmaster department. Our bodies are a little weak. Since we are a team, Fengwu shouldn't mind giving up the tent to us." Chapter 434. She was sure that Fengwu would not refuse. If she dared to refuse, then she would offend 3 people at once. Their team only had 4 girls in total. If she offended the 3 of them, then let's see how she would live in the future. Fengwu looked at her and blinked her eyes, then looked at Sandy and Anma. Sandy's face was a little red, looking a little embarrassed. Anma frowned and shielded Kimmy, but did not say anything. "What does your health have to do with me?" Fengwu did not understand why Kimmy would say that. If the 3 of them had problems with their health, then couldn't they just go see a doctor? What was the use of telling her? How can you be so unreasonable? We are all in the same team. Don't be so selfish." Kimmy's face was red as she loudly scolded Fengwu. Who would have thought that Fengwu would completely ignore her? She only glanced at her, and then went into the tent, not saying anything to Kimmy. "Come out. Do you hear me? Come out." Kimmy was about to go crazy. Ever since she was young, she had been loved by everyone everywhere. This woman actually dared to ignore her like this. Sure enough, she was as uneducated as Eve had said. Kimmy and Fengwu were in the same year, and she was also a student of the mage department. Among the people that Kimmy knew, one of them happened to be Eve, who had some personal grudges with Fengwu. Eve and Kimmy's relationship was not bad. Kimmy was Zicheng's hardcore fan. In the class, she was the girl that supported Zicheng the most besides Eve. Her favorability with Zicheng had already reached 95%. Very soon their favorability might reach 100%. In order to increase their favorability, Zicheng had worked very hard in the class. He had done many things to help his classmates. No matter who spoke to her, she would listen very politely. She had never felt impatient. No matter which classmate came to her for help, she would be duty-bound to help them. Although Zicheng's action of pulling out the suppressing demon sword and releasing the devil general was criticized by many people in the school, it actually didn't affect her class that much. Usually, Camille had heard a lot of bad things about Fengwu from Eve. She didn't expect that her luck would be so bad, that she would be paired with such a hateful woman in a random team. Eve had said that this woman had never given Zicheng any face. Instead, she was vicious and used her harmless appearance to deceive people. Although Kimmy was non-committal, she still believed half of it. In Kimmy's opinion, there must be a reason for a person to hate another person. Eve couldn't possibly hate her for no reason. Therefore, she didn't like Fengwu, so she wanted to cause trouble for her. However, she didn't expect that Fengwu would dare to offend 3 girls at the same time. She didn't know what was good for her. Outside the tent, Camille's shouts could be heard distinctly in the stillness of the wood. "Enough, Junior Camille. If you still want to shout, then leave this place and go somewhere else to shout. Don't bring harm to all of us," Anma said in displeasure. Ober frowned as he looked at Camille. This Camille really knew how to cause trouble. He was somewhat worried that Camille's self-righteous personality would cause some trouble in the future. Camille didn't know that she had already been targeted by Captain Ober. She had become the focus of attention, so he was afraid that she would be a burden. After being shouted at by Anma, Camille finally became well-behaved and didn't dare to speak again. Fengwu slept soundly and sweetly in the tent. She didn't care about the noise outside at all. The night passed just like that. The next morning, the clear sound of birds could be heard in the forest. The first rays of sunlight shone through the leaves onto the faces of Ober and the others. This night they didn't sleep deeply. Although they were sitting by the fire, the weather was still a bit cold. The boys were fine, but the girls couldn't stand the cold at night. Several girls huddled together for warmth. Camille suggested that they all go into Fengwu's tent to sleep together. However, no one agreed. Shandy was too embarrassed to snatch her junior's tent. As for Anma, as a genius of the fourth-year pharmacist department, she disdained to do such a thing. Therefore, the matter of snatching the tent had become a one-man show for Kemi. After putting away the tent and eating breakfast, Fengwu followed behind everyone in high spirits and began their new journey. Other than Fengwu, most of the others weren't in good spirits. Because of the change in weather last night, no one slept much. In addition, sleeping in this kind of forest made them feel insecure. Therefore, other than Fengwu, no one else really fell asleep. Today, as Fengwu walked, she would climb up some fruit trees to pick fruits when she passed by them. When she saw some edible wild vegetables, she would also pick them and put them in her space. Of course, Fengwu didn't know if these things were edible or not. However, she could hear some sounds from the other plants. From the other plants, she could tell which ones were edible and which weren't. Seeing Fengwu pick wild fruits along the way, everyone was curious. Finally, Anma couldn't help but ask, "Junior Fengwu, aren't you afraid that these fruits are poisonous? You dare to pick them so casually?" Anma was a genius pharmacist in the 4th year. She was confident that she knew these plants the best among everyone. Because of their profession, no one else knew more about these plants than her. Seeing Fengwu pick wild fruits casually, she wasn't thinking about whether Fengwu could tell which ones were poisonous or not. Instead, she was worried that Fengwu would poison herself to death by eating random things. It had to be known that this was a team competition. If one person was eliminated, it meant that everyone was eliminated. Therefore, if Fengwu was poisoned to death, it meant that all of them would have to accompany her and withdraw from the competition. Thinking of this, Aubert and the others were also worried that Fengwu would be poisoned to death in this place. If that happened, all of them would be implicated by her. "Junior Fengwu, if you're not sure if these fruits are edible, then don't pick them. If they're poisonous, all of us will be in trouble." "That's right. Please think about all of us." Kemi had long disliked Fengwu. Seeing that someone was criticizing Fengwu, she naturally didn't want to fall behind, and immediately jumped out. "Don't eat random things. This is a team competition. If one person dies, the whole team dies. I hope you can remember this," Aubert said with a cold face. "I'm not randomly picking them. These things are clearly edible." Fengwu widened her eyes and looked seriously at the others. Kemi sneered. "You think it's edible just because you say so?" Senior Anma is a genius pharmacist in the 4th year. Senior Anma didn't say that it's edible. Could it be that you're better than Senior Anma? Fengwu didn't give her face. She also didn't want to let Fengwu have an easy time. It would be best if she was hated by everyone. Chapter 435. Senior Anma, are the fruits and weeds Fengwu just picked edible? Kemi turned to ask Anma. "I'm not sure either." Anma didn't know much about plants from ancient times. Most of the plants from ancient times had already gone extinct, and there were no records of them in many books. So Anma really didn't know much about them. She couldn't determine which fruits were edible and which were poisonous, so she could only answer that she didn't know. "See, even Senior Anma doesn't know. How can you know which ones are edible? Don't joke around." Kemi snorted disdainfully. Fengwu didn't say anything. She just casually took out a fruit from her space, wiped it on her clothes, and opened her mouth to take a big bite. With the sound of the fruit entering her mouth, everyone's expression changed. If Fengwu was poisoned to death, it meant that all of them would be eliminated. Absolutely not. However, Fengwu had already eaten the fruit, and it was too late to stop her. Everyone blamed Fengwu in their hearts for not being sensible. Why couldn't she think for everyone? Before she ate it, didn't she think that she would be eliminated from the competition if she died from eating it? Everyone was unhappy, but there was nothing they could do. She had already eaten the fruit, and it was useless for them to stop her. Now they could only hope that the fruit was as poisonous as Fengwu said. Soon, Fengwu finished eating the fruit, and her body didn't have any adverse reactions. Another hour passed, and there was still no reaction from her. Maybe this fruit could really be eaten. It could be eaten. Did this mean that they wouldn't have to starve in 3 days? This fruit can really be eaten. Sandy's surprised voice sounded. She had been worried about what everyone would do after 3 days. The problem of food had become a huge stone pressing down on everyone's hearts. Now they didn't have to worry about anything. They had found something to eat. In the blink of an eye, Feng Wu had transformed from a junior, who was a hindrance, to a hero who had saved everyone. While everyone climbed up the tree to pick the fruit that Feng Wu had just eaten, outside the arena, the conflict between Feng Wu and her teammates was clearly transmitted on the screen. Wow! That girl called Feng Wu is too amazing. She can even recognize an ancient plant. What's wrong with that? Maybe she just guessed it. Guessed? Show me if you have the ability then. But that girl called Kimmy's personality isn't that good. Feng Wu didn't offend her. So why is she always picking on her? TSK, I don't know. Didn't you remember anything when you heard the name Feng Wu? Remember what? She is one of Scholar Mingxi's pursuers. Last time, the matter of her proposing to Senior Mingxi at the student cafeteria was big enough. Later on, many scandals about her were exposed. Later on, it was confirmed that the news was wrong and lacked authenticity. Kimmy is also one of the girls in our class who has a crush on Senior Mingxi. She has long disliked Feng Wu's high-profile proposal to Senior Mingxi. In addition, Senior Ming, she also brought Feng Wu along on this trip. So Kimmy is extremely jealous. It's normal for her to pick on Feng Wu. So that's how it is. But how did you know? How could I not know? That Kimmy is in our class. She has a princess syndrome. Just looking at her is annoying. A few girls gathered together and started gossiping about Kimmy. Poor Kimmy still didn't know that her background was about to be exposed. Through the images sent back by the holographic screen, everyone can see that this girl named Feng Wu actually has the ability to distinguish edible plants. This is really unexpected. Originally, we all thought that after this team entered the forest, they wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Who would have thought that things would take a turn for the better, giving them a glimmer of hope? What will they do next? Let's wait and see. Tamancha's voice clearly traveled into everyone's ears. Even the onlookers outside the school could hear it clearly. Among the onlookers, there were a few acquaintances of Feng Wu. Fuck, that woman is really asking for a beating. She dares to cause trouble for Xiao Wu. If I see her next time, see how I'll deal with her. Ting Feng said with a glare. Count me in. When the time comes, we'll beat her up together. Ting Yu said as she waved her little fist. We haven't seen each other in so long, and Xiao Wu is still so dumb. Pei Qing shook his head and sighed as he stared at the hologram. The three of them were the three members of the expert team. They had heard that Notre Dame du Starlight would be holding an extreme survival challenge, and had thought that they might be able to see Feng Wu and a juror, whom they hadn't seen in a while. So they had come to take a look. They hadn't expected to see Feng Wu's competition not long after they had stood there. Feng Wu still didn't know that three old acquaintances were outside complaining about the injustice she had suffered. The three of them had already decided to wait until after the competition to put a gunny sack over Kemi's head. Because Feng Wu had found an edible fruit, the members of the team didn't have to worry about food anymore. Feng Wu's identity had also undergone a huge change. Her ability to identify plants was extremely useful in this place. As long as there was food, they could slowly find their way out without worrying about being poisoned or starved to death in this place. After having food, everyone's mood improved a lot, and the pressure in their hearts also lessened a lot. In order to leave this forest, they began to rack their brains and think of all sorts of ways. They tried to leave a mark on the tree, but no matter how they walked, they would always return to the original place. It turned out that they had actually been walking in circles in this place all this time, and hadn't left this area at all. This was definitely not good news for Feng Wu and the others. They had to leave this forest as soon as possible and find the school emblem. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to pass the team competition at all. Standing in the forest, they could hear the sounds of birds and insects. There were also many creatures living in this forest, but other than hearing the sounds, they couldn't see anything. Even if Feng Wu wanted to find a small animal to ask for directions, it wouldn't be possible. Day after day passed, and Feng Wu and the others had been trapped in the forest for 10 days. Finally, on the 11th day, they successfully left the forest. Although the forest was a trap, they had also found 2 school emblems in the forest. As long as they gathered 10 more school emblems, it would mean that they had passed the team competition. Out of the forest, there was a flat path. In front of the path was a village. This village wasn't abandoned, and they could see many people walking around. Great, there are people in front, Kemi said excitedly. Chapter 436. They had been munching on wild fruits and vegetables for the past few days. Fengwu's water-purifying equipment and iron pot had come in handy. They were even able to eat wild vegetable soup in the woods. If it weren't for the soup, eating wild fruits every day would have made them puke. Now that they had finally seen some signs of human habitation, they could finally go to the village to get some food and a good rest. It would be perfect if they could find the school emblem in the village. With this thought in mind, the group walked briskly toward the village. Currently, everyone was filled with joy. Even though they were on high alert, they were more eager to reach the village as soon as possible, so they could have a good meal and have a good rest. They had been living in the woods for 10 days, yet they had not had a good night's sleep. Finding a place where they could have a good rest was simply too tempting for them. As they approached the village, they could clearly see the people moving around inside. This place. Fengwu frowned slightly. A strong aura of resentment appeared in front of Fengwu. Fengwu did not notice it when she was quite a distance away, but when she got closer, she realized there was a strong aura of resentment in the village. Among the resentment, there was fear, despair, and other emotions. Fengwu had no idea what was going on, but the strong aura of resentment was telling Fengwu that the village was extremely dangerous. It was definitely not a good place. After analyzing the possible danger of the village, Fengwu quickly took a step forward and blocked the path of the others. What are you doing? Kemi glared at Fengwu, who had suddenly blocked her path. She could not wait to enter the village to rest. She did not want to waste any time with Fengwu here. The village is very dangerous, you can't go in. Fengwu said. Hehe, it's dangerous just because you say so. I insist on going in. What can you do about it? Kemi waved Fengwu's hand away and strode forward. What's going on? As the captain, Ober was quite rational. After spending so many days together, he believed that Fengwu wasn't someone who would talk nonsense. If she said that there was danger ahead, then it was very likely that there was some danger in the village that no one had discovered yet. There's a strong aura of resentment in the village ahead. Although I don't know what's going on, it's very dangerous, Fengwu answered seriously. Resentment. Ober didn't expect this to be the danger Fengwu was talking about. But could she see resentment? Weren't necromancers the only ones who could see these things? How did Fengwu see it? If she had the talent to become a necromancer, why would she enter the swordmaster department? In people's minds, becoming a magician was much more amazing than becoming a swordmaster. Ah, a monster. Just as Ober was about to ask a few more questions, a scream came from not far away. The one who screamed was Kemi. No one noticed that while Ober and Fengwu were talking, she had already run into the village. She had only been in the village for less than a minute, but she had already let out such a miserable scream. Not good. Everyone was shocked. Their bodies reacted faster than their brains, and they had already rushed out of the village. Although everyone already believed Fengwu's words about the village being dangerous, because Kemi was trapped in the village, they had no choice but to go in and save her. It was all because of these damned rules. If they couldn't save her, then they wouldn't be able to continue the competition. When everyone rushed into the village, they saw that the villagers in their eyes had turned into terrifying monsters. These monsters didn't look like humans because they had fangs in their mouths, and their eyes were as red as blood. Their skin was so dry that there wasn't any moisture in it, and their bodies were as stiff as zombies. Their movements didn't seem very agile. If Zicheng and Irene were standing here, they would definitely scream in their hearts, zombies. That's right, these things were actually zombies. Back then, Longza Gamer had specially designed zombies, which were popular in the 21st century, to be a type of dungeon monster in the virtual realm. The main storyline of this competition was related to zombies. It was just that they didn't know about it yet. What is this thing? Emma cried out in surprise. No matter what it is, take Kemi away first. As Ober spoke, he had already pulled out the long sword in his hand. He slashed at the zombie that was chasing Kemi. What happened next surprised Ober. He didn't expect the zombie's body to be so tough. He was full of confidence that he could finish off the monster with one slash, but he didn't expect that the zombie's body would be as weak as a rock. Although the zombie's body was injured by his slash, the zombie chasing Kemi didn't seem to feel anything, and continued to attack Ober. Ober's strength had been completely sealed, so he could only rely on his own strength and his memory of sword moves. Without the support of combat energy, the power of these sword moves was reduced to less than 10%. Ober used his sword to fight with the zombie for a long time. Finally, before the zombies in the village surrounded them, he rescued Kemi. Although Kemi was scratched, she was lucky enough to survive. They retreated a few dozen meters away from the village before stopping. When they found that the monsters in the village couldn't chase them out, everyone was completely relieved. They ran to a river some distance away from the village to rest, but found that the river water had turned black. The color was like ink. Let's take a break. It looks like they can't get out of the village. And Ma looked back. In everyone's eyes, the village was now like a monster. What the hell are those things? They can't be killed by swords. Their skin is really thick. Charon breathed a sigh of relief, but he was also very puzzled. That's right. Those things are too scary. If we hadn't run faster than them, we wouldn't have been able to escape. Megan was also rejoicing in his heart. Don't talk about it anymore. Come and take a look at Kemi. Why do I feel like something is wrong with her? Sandy's anxious voice sounded. What's wrong? And Ma, as the only talented girl in the pharmacist department, immediately went forward to inquire after hearing Sandy's voice. Senior and Ma, come and take a look. Kemi doesn't seem to be well. She's been having a fever since the beginning. We don't have any medicine on us. What should we do? Sandy said anxiously. What's a fever? If she didn't rush into the village so recklessly, we wouldn't have all died in there. Charon glanced at Kemi, whose face was red from the fever. Because of Kemi, his team almost couldn't pass the team competition. It would be strange if he had anything good to say. Chapter 437. You're dragging us down. Even Bob was too lazy to look at Kemi. This time, because of Kemi's carelessness, she had almost harmed the entire team. The boys could no longer give her any face. There were 4 girls in the team. Anma was a pharmacist, and could still be of some use to the team. Although Sandy didn't have any special skills, she was sensible, and would do whatever she was told to do. She never threw a tantrum or threw a tantrum. Fengwu had the ability to understand the language of beasts, and could identify ancient plants. Moreover, she was a member of the Swordmaster department, so she could be considered as a fighting force. Among the 4 girls, although Fengwu was a second-year student, she was the most useful one. She was also very obedient and wouldn't cause trouble. Only Kemi didn't have any skills. Every day, besides causing trouble, she mobilized everyone to isolate Fengwu. If one were to use a word to describe her, she would be a retard. She was simply a professional drag for 100 years. Anma also didn't like Kemi, but as a pharmacist she couldn't ignore Kemi. Anma walked over and checked the 2 deep scratches on Kemi's body. Now the scratches had turned black. Anma's heart trembled. Things were developing in the worst direction. She's poisoned. Anma's face sank. Poisoned? Everyone exclaimed. It wasn't that they cared about Kemi's body, but she couldn't die. The rules of the team competition were like this. If one person died, the whole team would die. This was no joke. Is there a way to detoxify it? Ober frowned and asked. I'll try, but I don't think there's much hope. This poison is too strange. I don't have any tools on me, so I can't analyze the composition of this poison. Amma felt that the hope of detoxifying it was very slim. After all, this wasn't the real world. There were so many medicines that could be used to detoxify the poison. In this world, the only way to detoxify the poison was to gather the herbs and reformulate the medicine. However, this world was very strange. Many plants seemed to have undergone some kind of mutation. She didn't know if these mutated plants still had any medicinal properties. Even if it still had the medicinal effect, whether the medicinal effect was more or less was a problem that Bai Su had to figure out. Refining medicine was not just about burning the medicinal herbs. This involved a lot of knowledge. For example, how much medicinal effect each herb contained was a question that must be known. Only by knowing the medicinal properties of each herb could the success rate of refining medicine be guaranteed. Now that these herbs had mutated, if she couldn't figure out all the ingredients in these herbs, then there was no way for her to successfully concoct the potion. Combining all of the above reasons, it was simply impossible to concoct an antidote for Khmer. There was no way to make a potion, but it was still possible to make a decoction. Anma circled around and successfully gathered some herbs. Then, she borrowed Fengwu's large iron pot and began to boil the decoction for Khmer. Fengwu opened her misty eyes and blinked a few times before regaining her composure. Standing beside her were the other members of the team. The faces of these members were all ashen. They were looking at Khmer as if they wanted to tear her apart. Khmer smiled bitterly as she dodged everyone's gazes that looked like they wanted to eat her alive. The failure of the challenge was not entirely her fault. She felt like she was very innocent. It wasn't like she wanted to be scratched by those monsters. Time returned to 5 minutes ago. It seems like Ober's team is in danger. Khmer's body is showing signs of being poisoned by the attacks of the unknown creatures. Luckily, they still have the genius of the 4th grade, Anma, in their team. I believe this poison shouldn't be too much of a problem for them. Tamancha's voice came through the sound amplification equipment. At this moment, the holographic screen was showing the scene of Anma boiling the decoction for Khmer, after the members of Fengwu's team had rescued Khmer. On the screen, Khmer was frowning in pain, as if she was enduring some kind of pain. You're wrong. The moment someone in their team was injured, their team competition had already ended. The vice principal's voice came through at this moment. Could it be that there's some kind of secret behind this? I believe the people at home are also very curious about what kind of challenge the school has set up for the participants in this village. The truth is, the monsters in the village were originally the villagers of the village. The background of the dungeon we set up is a kingdom destroyed by some kind of unknown virus. This virus is like a plague, extremely contagious. Once infected, they will quickly turn into a walking corpse with no consciousness. We call these people controlled by the virus zombies. When a person turns into a zombie, it means that the person's consciousness has already disappeared. All that's left is the desire for human flesh and blood. Zombies are covered in the virus. Once their flesh is scratched by a zombie, they will immediately be infected by the zombie virus. Gradually, the person who is scratched will also turn into a zombie. The antidote for the zombie virus does not exist in that world. Therefore, when Khmer was scratched, Ober's team was already disqualified. The vice principal explained the background of the dungeon. Everyone finally realized that there was such a sinister trap waiting for the participants. Those who did not participate in the competition were all glad that they did not participate. Otherwise, if they were scratched by those monsters and turned into those monsters, they would die a disgusting death. Sure enough, not long after the vice principal finished speaking, a clear scream came through the screen. It turned out that Sandy, who was the closest to Khmer and had been taking care of her, had her neck bitten by Khmer, who had suddenly turned into a zombie. Sandy only had time to scream once before she was completely dead. At this moment, a voice suddenly came from above Ober's team. Since 2 members of your team have died, this challenge is declared a failure. Not long after this voice came out, Fengwu and the others were all teleported out. Failed? They actually failed. Ober's team members could not believe it. In the blink of an eye, their competition was already over. Ober and the others were all aiming for the quota of Star Hall. Losing the challenge meant losing the quota, which was a huge blow to Ober and the others. Khmer did not dare to look back at everyone's eyes. She hurriedly left the virtual world. Although everyone was unwilling, they could not go to the school to kill her. They could only remember Khmer in their hearts. This was especially true for Sandy, who had been bitten to death by Kemi. She hated Kemi the most. Sandy couldn't let go of the terrifying memory of being bitten to death for a long time. That memory was simply too terrifying. And the person who brought her such a terrifying memory was Kemi. How could Sandy forgive her? Chapter 438. This was especially true for Sandy, who had been bitten to death by Kimmy. She hated Kimmy the most, and the terrifying memory of being bitten to death made Sandy unable to let go of it for a long time. That memory was simply too terrifying, and the person who brought her such a terrifying memory was Kimmy. How could Sandy forgive her? Not long after Kimmy left the virtual world, the others also left in low spirits. Fortunately, the individual competition hadn't started yet, so they still had a chance. Although they had lost the team competition, if they performed well in the individual competition, they still had a chance to participate in a special mission. Then, they would be accepted into the Star Hall and become a member of the Star Hall. It was just that they didn't get a good result in the team competition. Although they would get a higher score in the individual competition, it wasn't that easy to be chosen by the school to participate in a special mission. If everyone originally had a 50-50 chance of being chosen, then after losing the team competition, their entire team only had a 20% chance of being chosen to participate in a special mission team. Fengwu wasn't as disappointed as Aubert and the others. To her, losing wasn't a big deal. She didn't really care about whether or not she could enter the Star Hall. Thinking about it, she hadn't seen her master for a while. What was he doing? Fengwu thought about it and went to find her master, not caring about the team competition at all. At the same time, in a room in a hotel in the central city, a chubby man and a beautiful woman were sitting in the same room. You failed. The woman's eyes were very cold. Something happened this time. I underestimated the danger level of the sea god's tomb. The chubby man's honest face didn't have a trace of expression. Why did you auction the key I gave you? The beautiful woman asked coldly. I can't attract attention. It's safer to blend in with the crowd. The chubby man, who was heart calmly replied. Your mission to obtain the heart of water this time failed. His Highness is very dissatisfied with you. I hope you won't make the same mistake next time. You guys went through so much trouble to get me into the sea god's tomb. Not to get me to obtain the divine artifact, but to get me to obtain the heart of water. Since when did the blood race need to use the 5 elements to cultivate? Don't worry about that. We received news that the humans have already found the location of the heart of wood. They will send people to retrieve it in a few days. You must find a way to obtain the heart of wood and atone for your mistake. I understand. Hart nodded. He had been dealing with the vampires for a long time. From the day he decided to work with the vampires, there was no turning back. Outside the Notre Dame du Starlight, in a delicate villa, Feng Yinran was listlessly handing water to the flowers in the yard. These flowers had already bloomed, and the faint fragrance of the flowers made people feel relaxed and happy. Yinran, why didn't you go to the virtual realm to participate in the extreme survival challenge this time? You can't always stay at home. Feng Tianxing carried a tray of snacks and walked to the white round table in the garden and sat down. Mom, because of Mildy and O'Brien's death recently, the way my classmates look at me has changed. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't ask O'Brien to like me. Why do they say that I'm a bad person? I didn't do anything. Mildy said. Feng Yinran felt that she had been wronged. Because of some of the rumors in school, she had been staying in her mother's house except for going to class. She didn't even dare to go back to the dormitory. She was afraid that her classmates would look at her like she was a mistress. She didn't feel that she had done anything wrong. Was it her fault that O'Brien liked her? She couldn't stop others from liking her. Mildy was the one who did this. It was her and O'Brien's problem. Why did everyone blame her? What did she do wrong? Why did she have to bear the responsibility for their deaths? Even Mildy and O'Brien's family members came to the school and asked the school to expel her. Although the school didn't agree, this matter still spread. Her classmates who used to have a good relationship with her all avoided her. Even the boys who used to chase after her left her side and no longer revolved around her. This made Feng Yinran, who had been popular with her classmates since she entered the Notre Dame du Starlight, unable to accept such a difference. Silly child, you don't have to pay attention to them. They don't know anything. Mom knows that it's not Yinran's fault. Mom has already explained it to the school for you. The school has no evidence to prove that you and O'Brien had a relationship, so you can rest assured. No matter what those classmates think, As long as you don't violate the school rules, nothing will happen to you. Feng Tianqing lovingly pulled Feng Yinran to sit on the chair and coaxed her softly. I'm not worried about whether I will be punished or not. I just don't want to see the way they look at me. Feng Yinran sighed. Good child, you have been wronged. Don't worry. They will soon regret treating you like this today. Feng Yinran was about to say something, but suddenly felt weak. Her bones were aching, and her face was pale. This pain made her feel like she was in hell. Yinran. Feng Tianqing hurriedly stepped forward and helped Feng Yinran back to her room. He found a cup of blood-like red liquid and let Feng Yinran drink it. Feng Yinran drank the liquid, and her whole face slowly regained its color. Mom, I'm in so much pain. When will my body completely recover? I don't want to be like this anymore. Feng Yinran cried sadly. Since she was a child, she had been tortured because she was a hybrid of the blood clan and the human clan. There were two bloodlines in her body. Although the human clan and the blood clan were very similar, they must not be of the same race. Therefore, if they crossed species, they would definitely be cursed by the bloodline. Because of the curse, her body had been weak since she was a child. Every once in a while, her bloodline would reject each other. The rejection of each other's bloodlines caused her great pain. If it weren't for the fact that she didn't want her parents to worry, she would have died because she couldn't bear the pain. Feng Tianqing painfully moved the cup that Feng Yinran drank from. The cup was filled with the blood of a virgin. Feng Yinran had to drink the blood of a virgin to ease the pain, because of the rejection of each other's bloodlines, since she was a child. As she grew older, Feng Yinran's pain became more and more intense, and the time she drank the blood became more and more frequent. Under the field where Feng Tianqing lived, there were several virgins who were used to provide blood for Feng Yinran. These women were all rural women. In order not to attract attention, she specially found a few women with ordinary family backgrounds and were not valued at home. Because these women were not valued by their families, even if they were lost, it would not attract attention. Chapter 439. Feng Tianqing was a very intelligent woman. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to get along with Feng Yinran's father for so many years without being discovered by the people of the ancient eastern country. These women were raised by her to relieve the pain of Feng Yinran's bloodline rejection. Because there were virgins for her to take blood every time the illness flared up, no one discovered that Feng Yinran was different and only thought that she was in poor health. Silly child, you just need to endure a little longer. Our Feng family has the strongest bloodline of sword masters. As long as you absorb the blood of the Feng family's experts, you will definitely be fine. Feng Tianqing touched Feng Yinran's hair, her eyes full of love. Mother, do you want me to absorb grandfather's blood? This won't do. Grandfather is so good to me, I can't do this. Feng Yinran was shocked. She had never thought of absorbing her grandfather's blood. Grandfather had always treated her better than anyone else. Feng Yinran instinctively rejected absorbing Feng Wuliu's blood. You child, your grandfather has always loved us mother and daughter the most. If your grandfather knew that sacrificing himself could save his precious granddaughter, he would definitely be willing to sacrifice himself for us mother and daughter. Feng Tianqing didn't doubt Feng Wuliu's love for her. Feng Wuliu's love for her was completely incomparable to her sister, Feng Tianjiao. Every time she saw Feng Wuliu being cold to Feng Tianjiao, because of her, she felt extremely comfortable in her heart. Her mother's attitude towards her was extremely cold because of a divination, and even wanted to kill her. She would never forget what happened that night. If it wasn't for her father arriving in time, she would definitely have died in the hands of the woman she called mother, and the sister, who had always been pampered by her mother. Fortunately, her father didn't believe in that divination, and doted on her even more. As for Feng Tianjiao, because of the crime of wanting to kill her biological sister, she was disliked by Feng Wuliu. Their identities were swapped after their mother's death. She became the beloved daughter of the heavens, and Feng Tianjiao was regarded by everyone as an unruly, willful, and ruthless woman who couldn't even tolerate her biological sister. She originally thought that Feng Tianjiao wouldn't be able to accept the change in everyone's attitude, and would cry and make a fuss. However, She didn't have any reaction. She didn't cry or make a fuss. She didn't even call out who Feng Wuliu and Feng Tianqing favored more. It seemed that other than their dead mother, she didn't care about anyone else. She originally thought that everyone's attitude would let her understand that she was the true genius of the Feng family. Unexpectedly, Feng Tianjiao had never given up on killing her. More than once, she had almost died in Feng Tianjiao's hands. Afterwards, she had no choice but to go to the Blood Moon Forest. She was afraid that if she didn't leave, she would fall into Feng Tianjiao's evil hands. It was also in the Blood Moon Forest that she met Yinran's father, the only man she had ever loved in her life. Her father could disregard Feng Tianjiao for her. Then, for his most beloved granddaughter, shouldn't he make a sacrifice? Fortunately, Feng Wuliu didn't know that his own daughter was wholeheartedly thinking of letting his daughter absorb his grandfather's flesh and blood. If he knew, who knew if he would be angered to death? No, I can't watch grandfather sacrifice himself for me. Grandfather is an elder. I can't be so unfilial. Feng Yinran shook her head and rejected Feng Tianqing's proposal. You have to do it even if you can't. If you don't absorb all of your grandfather's bloodline power, you will die. Feng Tianqing looked at her daughter seriously and said, No, I won't die. Because I have a better goal. Feng Yinran suddenly smiled mysteriously. Are you talking about Feng Wu and her little bastard child? Feng Tianqing asked suspiciously. Don't look at how Feng Tianqing always acted like she loved Feng Wu very much at home. In fact, she was very disgusted by the fact that Feng Wu was pregnant out of wedlock and didn't even know who her lover was. Feng Wu was the daughter of her and the man she loved the most. Feng Wu's child was definitely not born out of love. It was just the product of an affair. Feng Tianqing had always been a proud woman. How could she fancy a child born from an affair? My goal is Feng Yi. Feng Yinran said. Feng Wu's son. Feng Tianqing didn't think that her daughter's goal wasn't Feng Wu but her son. But the bloodline in Feng Ye's body shouldn't be pure enough. Absorbing his blood might not be of any use to you. Feng Tianqing said with some worry. No, Feng Ye's blood is very useful. He is the most intelligent child I have ever seen. The life energy in his body is so strong that it's unbelievable. I have never seen such a strong life energy in anyone. As long as I absorb all of the energy in that child, I believe that my body will be able to recover completely. Moreover, I will become much more powerful than you and father can imagine. Feng Yinran didn't know if this was an ability that only mixed bloods of the human race and the blood clan had. She could see through the powerful energy in Feng Ye's body. She instinctively knew that as long as she absorbed the child's life energy, it would be very beneficial to her. It was because of this reason that she was so enthusiastic every time she saw Feng Yi. She really wanted to get along well with that child. This way, she could absorb the child's energy without anyone noticing. Is what you said true? Feng Tianqing really didn't think that Feng Yi would be so useful. Ever since she returned to the Feng family, she had been thinking about whose blood she should let her daughter absorb. Feng Wuliu, Feng Tianqing, Feng Juntian. These were all within her range of choices. She had even considered Feng Wu and Feng Ting. Feng Ting was only the daughter of a lowly girl. It was impossible for her to let her baby absorb the flesh and blood of such a thing. As for Feng Wu, although everyone said that she didn't have any talent, she knew that Feng Wu's talent wasn't any worse than Feng Juntian's. It was just that when Feng Wu was very young, she had already treated Feng Wu as a blood meal that could be absorbed by her daughter in the future. So in order to prevent Feng Wu's strength from increasing, she fed her a medicine that could destroy talent when Feng Wu was still testing her talent. From then on, a super genius who cultivated both magic and martial arts became a cripple in both. And no one in the Feng family doubted that Feng Wu wasn't born a cripple. They thought that she was born this way. Although Feng Wu's talent was destroyed, her bloodline wasn't. As long as her daughter absorbed Feng Wu's flesh and blood, she would definitely be reborn and become a blood emperor. In the normal course of this world, Feng Wu would die with the child on the day of giving birth. Without Feng Wu, Feng Wuliu became the first target of this pair of mother and daughter. Not only did they absorb Feng Wuliu, they also absorbed Feng Tianqing's bloodline in order to be foolproof. Later on, this pair of mother and daughter succeeded. In the entire Feng family, only Feng Juntian survived, because Feng Yanran represented the blood race and signed a peace treaty with the human race. Feng Juntian couldn't take revenge even if he wanted to. He lived in the pain of not being able to avenge his family for the rest of his life. Chapter 440. In the end, the mother and daughter pair did succeed. Feng Juntian was the only one who survived in the entire Feng clan, because Feng Yanran represented the blood race and signed a peace treaty with the human race. Feng Juntian couldn't take revenge even if he wanted to. He lived in the pain of not being able to avenge his family for the rest of his life. And in this life, with the arrival of Feng Wu, Feng Yi was successfully born. This child who shouldn't have come to this world was born with great power. His power would only grow stronger as he grew. Because of Feng Ye's uniqueness, this child replaced Feng Wuliu and Feng Tianqing's position, and became the food that Feng Tianqing and Feng Tianqing had set their eyes on. Feng Wu didn't know all of this. Feng Wu was currently going to Bai Lianfeng's residence in the ethereal realm. Bai Lianfeng had specially created a place that looked like Mount Yu in order to reminisce about the days in the Little Qin realm. Not only did this place have a mountain range that looked like Mount Yu, it also had a village that looked exactly like the village at the foot of Mount Yu. Even the little animals that had played with Feng Wu since she was young looked exactly the same. After playing with the little rabbit for a while, Feng Wu happily ran into a bamboo house. This bamboo house was where her master, Bai Lianfeng, lived. The layout of the bamboo house was exactly the same as on Mount Yuhua. Feng Wu easily found Bai Lianfeng in his study. Master. Feng Wu saw her master whom she hadn't seen for a while. Her beautiful black eyes lit up, and she threw herself into her master's embrace. You little girl, you only came to see your master after so long. What did you gain from your trip this time? Bai Lianfeng put down the book in his hand and dotingly rubbed his beloved disciple's head. Feng Wu told her master everything from the time she went out to sea to when she left the sea god's tomb. Bai Lianfeng only listened quietly and didn't interrupt. After Feng Wu finished, he said, "Stay away from that Ziqing in the future. That girl's thoughts are too heavy. She's not suitable to be friends with you." Okay. Feng Wu agreed without thinking. In any case, she and Ziqing weren't friends. They were just classmates. Bai Lianfeng nodded his head in satisfaction. Sure enough, his precious little disciple was the cutest. You can try your best in this extreme survival challenge. The special mission this time is a bit special. If you don't go with them, I'm afraid it won't be easy for them to complete this mission. Bai Lianfeng continued. Okay, I'll try my best. Feng Wu's voice came from Bai Lianfeng's chest. Her voice sounded very serious. So obedient. Bai Lianfeng was not stingy in praising her beloved disciple. Being praised by his master, he was happy. Feng Wu grinned from ear to ear. She also told Father Yu about the things she had gained along the way. Among them, there were actually a few materials that he needed to rebuild his physical body. Thus, her master praised her as a reward, which made the Feng Wu girl's mood soar. She was determined to find more things for her master, so that he could praise her more often. When she returned to the dormitory at night, there wasn't a single person there. Feng Wu went to see Feng Wu. Little White was taking good care of Feng Ya. Now, even Bao Bao liked being by Little Bun's side. He was no longer so clingy to Feng Wu. Ever since Bao Bao saw Feng Ya, he had been circling around Feng Ya for some reason. Feng Ya liked Bao Bao a lot. The man and beast played together every day. She asked Little White to make a delicious meal, and enjoyed it very much. After dinner, she went back to the virtual realm. At this time, the team competition hadn't ended yet. However, there were more than 10 teams that survived. More than half of the students in the school had been eliminated. At this time, the vice president was still sitting on the stage. Beside him was still Tamansha. As you can see, a month has passed since the start of the competition. In this month, 80% of the teams have been eliminated for one reason or another. Now there are only 11 teams left on the field. Each of these 11 teams is extremely strong. Which team will win in the end? Let's ask the vice president for his opinion. Tamansha turned to the vice president. The vice president coughed softly and began to speak. The 11 teams are very strong. Each team has a few strong experts. It's hard to tell who will win in the end. The vice president fondled his long white beard and said with a smile, "Who wants to hear that from you?" Ta Mansha slowly pressed the cross on her forehead. "All right, it's already night time in the arena. Let's make use of this time to interview our fellow students for their opinions. Hello everyone. I'm your senior, Olivia. I'll be doing the interview." A golden-haired beauty with golden eyes came up to them. She was holding a sound-amplifying device in her hand. Behind Olivia was a senior carrying a piece of equipment. The senior was able to run so fast, even though he was carrying a piece of equipment. It was obvious that he was from the Swordmaster School. Everyone was wondering what the strange equipment was until they saw the people being interviewed appear on the screen. The screen was split into two. One half was showing the participants sleeping, while the other half was showing the interview. "Hello, student. May I ask if you're one of the contestants for this year's competition?" Olivia stopped a male sword master with her sound-amplifying device. She raised the device in front of the man and asked with a smile, "Me? Yeah, I'm taking part in the team competition." The man was startled for a moment before he answered. "Can you tell me why you lost in the team competition?" Olivia asked. The man's expression suddenly shifted when he heard the question. He was infuriated. "Isn't the reason why we lost in the team competition because a useless flower vase joined the team? That bitch. It's fine if she's useless. We don't expect her to lead the team. But she's not doing anything every day. Yet she still has the ability to lure the monsters to her side to attack her. I wonder if that woman killed the entire family of those monsters in her past life. Those monsters kept chasing after her, and they couldn't stop once they saw her. Our whole team is being dragged down by that bitch. If I see her again, I'll beat her up so badly that even her mother won't recognize her." The man cursed the woman on the screen for 10 minutes before he finally stopped. Olivia did not dare to ask any other questions. She quickly ended the interview and left with the man with the anti-magic equipment. Olivia then interviewed a few participants who had lost in the team competition. Every one of them was cursing the black sheep of their team. They were extremely disgusted by the black sheep of their team. It wasn't easy to interview someone who didn't scold her. But that person's expression changed, and he ran away. Oliver still didn't understand what was going on. It wasn't until someone beside her saw and reminded her that she realized that the man she interviewed was the black sheep himself. No wonder he ran away so quickly. Chapter 441. Next, Oliver interviewed a few contestants who had lost in the group competition. These contestants were all cursing the black sheep in their teams, and they hated those black sheep. It wasn't easy to interview someone who didn't scold her. But that person's expression changed, and he ran away. Oliver still didn't understand what was going on. It wasn't until someone beside her saw and reminded her that she realized that the man she interviewed was the black sheep himself. No wonder he ran away so quickly. Oliver's interview wasn't that smooth. Every contestant had a lot of complaints to vent, but she wasn't here to listen to these people's complaints. Later, she had no choice but to find a few girls to interview. Fengwu stood in the square, looking at the scene of the competition on the holographic screen. The 11 teams in the arena were all in different positions, so they didn't meet. Most of the teams that were eliminated because they didn't understand the creatures called zombies. The 11 teams that were lucky enough to survive until now were only able to survive because they possessed extraordinary strength and were more cautious than the other teams. However, this competition wasn't just that difficult. Now that the dungeon had been upgraded, the zombies in the dungeon had been upgraded from rank 1 zombies to rank 2 zombies. This change caused some teams that had underestimated the strength of the zombies to be eliminated. A white light flashed, and 3 teams that were still in the arena were eliminated. These 3 teams were all strong, and it wasn't easy for them to survive until now. It was a pity that they were eliminated at the last moment. These teams had already collected about 10 school emblems. If they were given a little more time, they would definitely be able to complete the collection of school emblems and pass the competition. Unfortunately, a competition was a competition, and failure was failure. There were no ifs. Mingxi realized that the longer they stayed in the arena, the more difficult it would become. Mingxi wasn't the only one who realized this. Some of the teams that were still alive also realized this phenomenon. Such a change would make it more difficult for them to win the competition. The competition was still going on. The Mingxi team had already found 8 school emblems. The further they went, the harder it was to find the emblems. They only needed 2 more emblems to complete the competition, but these last 2 emblems were the hardest to find. Mingxi's test was still to come. Fengwu ran out of the school and went to the streets to look for food. Notre Dame du Starlight screen was still broadcasting the contestants' progress. A crowd had gathered outside the school to watch the show. After all, this was the Mirage, so the school did not stop these people from watching. As long as they did not disturb the competition, it was not a big deal. Fengwu bought a bowl of sour plum soup when she left school. She didn't expect to meet 3 acquaintances. Xiaowu, Tingyu waved her little hands excitedly as she rushed towards Fengwu and sat down beside Fengwu. Tingfeng and Peiqing followed behind Tingyu and walked towards Fengwu happily. "Boss, a bowl of sour plum soup for OL-san," Tingyu shouted loudly as she slammed the table. "Coming." The boss looked up and replied slowly. He got up and went to get the soup. TSK, shouting so loudly. "I thought she would order something good. Turns out it's a cheap drink like sour plum soup." The nearby customers muttered softly. This was a small shop that sold drinks. There were all kinds of drinks in the shop, and the cheapest one was the popular drink like sour plum soup. A cup of sour plum soup only cost 2 copper coins. Because the production of sour plums was very cheap, it could not be sold for a high price. A bunch of poor people. Why would they come here to drink when they had no money? Look at them. They were drinking fragrant fruit tea and fruit juice. Sour plum soup was for the poor. Tingyu and the other 2 did not care about the subtle looks that others were giving them. They were still immersed in the excitement of seeing Fengwu. No matter what others said, they just pretended not to hear. Tingyu Tifeng big brother Peiqing. Fengwu was pleasantly surprised to see her 3 friends whom she had not seen for a long time. "Xiaowu, long time no see. Where have you been all this time? We couldn't find you and Captain Ajur." Tingyu complained softly. "Yeah, we couldn't find you." Tingfeng also drank a big mouthful of the sour plum soup served by the boss. "We watched your competition. It was very good. If you didn't meet someone who was dragging you down, Xiaowu would definitely succeed." Peiqing felt a little sorry for Fengwu. If it was an individual competition, Fengwu would have performed better. Unfortunately, it was a team competition, which was very disadvantageous for Fengwu. Fengwu answered Tingyu's question and told her about their trip to the sea. She also told Peiqing and the others about Death Island, Sea God's Tomb, and Bewitching Wind Island. Peiqing and the others never dreamed that Fengwu would experience so many things after not seeing her for a while. Every incident she encountered sounded extremely dangerous, but she managed to overcome them all. If they were the ones who encountered her, they would not be confident that they could survive. Peiqing and the others were shocked by Fengwu's experiences. They felt that the missions they had accepted recently were not dangerous at all compared to what Fengwu had encountered. Peiqing also told Fengwu about the missions they accepted and the interesting things they encountered during the missions. Peiqing and the others' lives were also very exciting. They looked for pets, caught adulterers, and eliminated bandits. As long as they could earn money, they would do these missions. Of course, Peiqing and the others accepted the missions according to their abilities. They would never challenge any difficult missions. The 3 of them were people who cherished their lives. "By the way, Xiaowu, we accepted a new mission. Are you interested in doing it with us?" This mission was issued by an old lady. That old lady suspects that her daughter-in-law is not human, so she wants to ask adventurers to help her find out the truth. "Xiaowu, do you want to come with us?" Tingyu held Fengwu's hand and asked cutely. "Do a mission?" Fengwu blinked. The individual competition would start in 10 days, so she could go. She nodded and agreed. Peiqing and the others cheered and agreed to meet at the school gate tomorrow morning. Fortunately, the students of the Swordmaster department did not need to memorize so many spells. As long as they scored high enough in actual combat during the exam, the teachers would not mind if their students accepted missions. After all, the swordmaster was a combat profession. Only in actual combat could they truly grow. After Feng Wu and Ting Yu discussed the time, they went down the virtual realm to ask for leave from the teacher. Knowing that Feng Wu was going to do a mission for the Adventurers Guild, the teacher very quickly approved Feng Wu's leave. This time, Feng Wu did not plan to bring Xiao Yi with her. However, who should she give Xiao Yi to? A jur was a good choice, but a jur usually had classes, and it was not convenient for him to take care of the child. Chapter 442. When Feng Wu was considering whether to let Tian Yu take care of the child for a period of time, the vice president received the news and appeared. He very actively expressed that he wanted to help Feng Wu take care of the child. Xiao Yi was also familiar with the vice president, because he was very active every time he took care of the child. Feng Wu also did not object to letting the kind old man take care of Xiao Yi. Xiao Yi had a place to go, and it was one of the two strongest people in the school. Feng Wu could rest assured about Xiao Yi's safety. The next day, she put Xiao Yi in the vice president's arms. She took the baby Rui beast and waved to Xiao Yi and left the school. A jur also wanted to go, but for some reason, he could not leave the school. This made a jur depressed, and could only watch Feng Wu and the three unreliable animals leave together. Feng Wu's departure attracted some people's attention, but most people's attention was on the extreme survival challenge. Although Feng Yanran and her daughter had their eyes on Xiao Yi, now that Xiao Yi was in the vice president's hands, it was impossible for them to do anything. The vice president was the strongest person in the school besides the president. Although no one had seen him fight, no one dared to touch the tiger's whiskers. Since Xiao Yi was handed over to the vice president, everyone found that the vice president would bring a little bun with him every time he commentated. This little bun was very cute. His delicate and cute little face was so cute that it could kill a lot of women. Do you think this child is the vice president's grandson? No way. I've never heard of the vice president having children. Then it's his son. That's even more impossible. The vice president is so old, how can he have a son? Then who is this child? Maybe it's the vice president's friend's child. There were different opinions about Xiao Yi's identity in the school. Only a few people recognized that this child was Feng Wu's legendary illegitimate child. Could it be that this child was actually the vice president and Feng Wu's illegitimate child? No, this idea was too dirty. If the vice president knew, he would definitely kill them. He definitely would. Could it be that this child? The vice principal saw that this child's bones were extraordinary, so he wanted to raise him up and pass on his mantle? This guess was accepted by many people, although they really couldn't see what kind of talent this little bun had to be able to catch the eye of the vice principal, who had seen countless geniuses. Regarding these guesses, the vice president did not say anything. Let them guess. Anyway, he had already made up his mind. He would not say anything. If they had the ability, they could go ahead and guess. Feng Wu did not know what had happened at school because of Xiao Yi. They had now arrived at Count Nicholas's castle through the teleportation portal. Outside the castle, a middle-aged man who looked like a butler led them through a hidden passage to a tall tower. Madam, the adventurer who accepted the mission has arrived. The housekeeper knocked on the door and walked in, respectfully reporting to the elegant old woman in the room. Let them in. An old voice with the vicissitudes of time came from the door. Pei Qing and the others stood quietly outside the door. They waited until a maid came to lead them in, and then they followed in. Hello, esteemed old madam. Pei Qing represented everyone, and led them to greet the old madam. No need to be so polite. The old madam's voice came. Feng Wu and the others looked over, only to find that the woman sitting on the sofa not far away did not look old. She looked to be in her 50s. Although there were traces of age on the old madam's face, they were not heavy. However, her old hair had turned white, and there seemed to be a hint of melancholy in her eyes. Now that you've accepted my quest, I'll explain the quest's requirements. I hope you won't disappoint me. I only listed the quest's reward at the Adventurers Guild, so that it wouldn't attract too much attention. If you can complete the quest, I'll increase the reward to 120,000 gold coins. 120,000 gold. So much. As expected of Count Nicholas's mother, she was rich. Speaking of Count Nicholas, he was a famous golden bachelor. Not only was he rich, but he also had power. He was the current castellan of Rain City. Rain City was famous because it rained for most of the 4 seasons. Because of the abundant rain, the crops here grew very quickly, and it was considered a very rich city. As the castellan, Count Nicholas was only 30 years old. Not only was he handsome, but he was also rich and had a respectable status. He was popular with many girls. However, such a popular golden bachelor had never been involved in any scandals with the people who had accepted the mission. Everyone who knew about him found it unbelievable. No matter what others thought, the count seemed to have no interest in women. Other than dealing with the affairs of the city, he rarely came into contact with women. Until one day, Nicholas suddenly brought back a beautiful woman and was deeply infatuated with her. The two of them got married less than a month after they met. This sudden wedding shocked many people. Pei-Qing also heard about it. At that time, they were still wondering what kind of beauty could make a man who had seen countless beauties and not be moved by her eagerly marry her. They didn't expect that less than half a year after the wedding, they would receive a mission from Count Nicholas's mother, and this mission was related to her daughter-in-law. Could it be that mother-in-law and daughter-in-law were really natural enemies? Because she didn't want to be replaced by this woman in her son's heart. She wanted to find trouble with her daughter-in-law. Or was there really something wrong with the new countess? No matter which possibility it was, it didn't have much to do with the adventurers who accepted the mission. What they had to do was find a way to find out the truth and collect the money. Then, the old lady told Fengwu and the others about her suspicions about her daughter-in-law. It turned out that after his daughter-in-law married into the family, Count Nicholas had changed. He didn't like to go out and stayed in the castle with his wife all day long. He also didn't like to deal with political affairs. In the past, although Nicholas didn't love his people like his children, he was definitely a good castellan who worked seriously and responsibly. But now, he didn't deal with any affairs and left all the affairs to the deputy castellan. The deputy castellan was Nicholas's good brother, who had grown up with him. The first person to notice that something was wrong with Nicholas was the deputy castellan. In addition, he was locked in the room with his wife all day long. His body was getting weaker day by day, and now he was even bedridden. Even the old lady, his mother, couldn't see her son every time she wanted to. Chapter 443. Nicholas seemed to be very infatuated with his wife. He couldn't stay away from her for even a moment. If the old madam had something to say to him, he would ask the countess to leave for a while. Nicholas would even say extremely harsh words to his mother, not caring if it would hurt his mother's feelings. It was impossible for a mother not to understand her child. Count Nicholas lost his father when he was young, and it was the old madam who raised him. Nicholas had always been very respectful to the old madam. The old madam knew that if it were her son, he wouldn't ignore his mother like this, no matter how much he loved a woman. At that time, the old madam had already begun to suspect that her son had been plotted against. In addition, Nicholas's good brother, the deputy castellan Worth, also said that Nicholas's recent behavior was very abnormal. The old madam couldn't help but suspect that all of this had something to do with the new countess, her daughter-in-law. In fact, when this daughter-in-law first entered the family, she was quite satisfied with the woman that her son insisted on marrying. As a mother, the old madam was very worried about her son. Finally, her son took a fancy to a girl. Based on her trust in her son, the old madam didn't stop the marriage and agreed to it. This was also one of the things that the old madam regretted the most now. If she had investigated the woman's identity a little back then, all of this might not have happened. In the past 6 months, because of her son's problem, the old madam was mentally and physically exhausted. Her hair had turned white because of too much pressure in the past 6 months. In fact, Fengwu and the other 3 weren't the first group of adventurers that the old madam invited. There were several groups of adventurers before them, But the results of their investigations were that there was nothing wrong with the Countess. She was just a human. All of the adventurers said the same thing. How could the old madam accept this? The old madam wasn't a person who gave up easily. If her mind wasn't strong enough, how could she raise her eldest son alone, and raise him to be so outstanding? The old madam began to look for other adventurers to take on the task. She believed that among so many adventurers, there would be someone with real ability who could see the problem. Therefore, this task was not so much to investigate the old madam's daughter-in-law, but to investigate whether the reason for Count Nicholas's change had anything to do with her daughter-in-law. If her son's problem could be solved, the reward would be increased even more. This was not a small amount. This reward was a huge sum of money. For the sake of the reward, the four of them accepted the mission and were arranged to enter Count Nicholas's castle as servants to carry out the investigation. In the past, the adventurers who came to investigate entered the castle as guests. But this time, Pei Qing took the initiative to enter the castle as a servant in order to facilitate the investigation. What could be more convenient than the role of a servant to understand the master's affairs? Countless people would pay attention to the actions of the guests, but it was different for the servants. No master would be so bored as to pay attention to the movements of the servants. It just so happened that during this period of time, the castle was indeed recruiting people. The reason was very simple. A few young maids had gone missing in the castle, so they had to recruit people to replace them. Only a few people knew about the disappearance of the maid. The castle had already sealed off the news. The count was bedridden, and the maids in the castle had disappeared one after another. It was no wonder that the old madam suspected her daughter-in-law. This woman was indeed too suspicious. This time, a total of 4 female servants and 2 male servants were recruited. Needless to say, Feng Wu and Ting Yu took up 2 places, and the remaining 2 male servants were naturally taken up by Ting Feng and Pei Qing. The 4 new maids were assigned to a room, except for Ting Yu and Feng Wu. The other 2 maids were locals. One of them sold fish, and the other was a farmer. They were recruited because they were young, good-looking, and had good character. Count Nicholas' castle had always had very high requirements for the maids. Not only did they have to be outstanding in appearance, but they also had to be efficient in their work and have a good character. Because of the high requirements, they were treated well. Working in the count's castle was the dream of many women. After entering the newly assigned room, the 4 girls began to tidy up the things they had brought. Because the count's castle had a unified newspaper, they did not have the opportunity to wear their own clothes. When they entered the castle, the other servants gave them 4 sets of spring and autumn clothes, 2 sets of each. In the room, the 4 girls had just finished tidying up their clothes when other maids came to take them to eat. Meals in the count's castle were always after the count's family had eaten, and the servants all ate from the same pot. When they entered the castle, they were given a large bowl, and each bowl could be marked with their own mark. When they ate, they would use their own bowl to eat. The servants all ate in the dining hall where the servants ate. The staple food in Rain City was rice, so every meal here was big rice. Stir-fry the big rice, vegetables, and meat together, and with a bit of seasoning, the servants' meal was ready. At the other end of the dining hall, there was a group of men and women who were dressed completely differently from them. When they faced the group of servants, their eyes were filled with arrogance, and the servants also looked at them with envy and jealousy. Who are those people? Ting Yu curiously whispered to Feng Wu. You don't even know them. The one who spoke was a new maid like Feng Wu. They are all maids and male servants who are 1 rank higher than us servants. They are people who can serve the master nearby, and their status is different from ours. It would be great if I could be promoted to a maid one day. A maid's salary is several times that of a servant's. Yes, if I could be a maid one day in this life, then everything would be worth it. Some of the maids began to chime in. Being able to be promoted from a maid to a maid was the highest goal of these maids. Their birth and talent meant that they could only be ordinary people for the rest of their lives. As an ordinary person, this kind of wish was already the greatest dream they could think of. Ting Yu had been born with a good background since she was young, and clearly did not understand why becoming a maid seemed to be a very amazing thing. Were maids not servants? Was it not the same? When Tingyu came back to her senses, she found that many people were looking at her, and the maids were glaring at her. What happened? Tingyu asked Fengwu with some apprehension. You said it. Fengwu said. No way. Tingyu wailed. When they entered the castle, they did not want to attract attention, but she did not expect to attract so many people's attention on the first day. If Pei Qing and Tingfeng found out, they would scold her to death. Chapter 444. Tingyu's shameless boasting caused an uproar in the dining hall. They didn't expect that someone would dare to say such fearless words in front of these maids. Didn't she know that these maids were all one level higher than her? If they wanted to mess with you, they could do it with just a word. You offended these maids, and you still didn't want to get away with it. Tingyu obviously also thought of this point. She suddenly felt a headache coming on. She finally understood what it meant to bring evil upon oneself was the hardest to bear. But it seemed that she understood a little. Tingyu thought with a face full of tears. Who is this person? She really doesn't have a brain. She even dares to offend the maids. She seems to be a newcomer. She has such poor eyesight. I don't know why the steward recruited her. The maids chose to listen to the rain and pointed at it, whispering nonstop. You don't have to lower your voice, I can hear you. Compared to these scum maids, Tingyu's hearing was not what these maids could imagine, because she had been practicing since she was young. Even if they deliberately lowered their voices, Tingyu could still hear them clearly. Look who this is. So it's a lowly maid. A lowly maid will always be a lowly maid. She doesn't even know the basic etiquette. She actually dares to speak rudely to us maids. A young and beautiful maid looked at Tingyu disdainfully and said, You still dare to speak rudely. Are you a god or something? I'm sorry. This girl is a newcomer who just arrived today. For my sake, please don't be calculative with her. At this time, a woman in her 30s walked over. This woman was the steward's daughter-in-law. She was usually in charge of all the maids' work. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was the head of the maids. Tingly, it's not that we don't want to give you face. With her personality, she will cause trouble sooner or later if she stays in our Earl's mansion. It's better to let her leave early. Although the maid was a little afraid of Tingyu's identity, she didn't want to let Tingyu off so easily. I know. Don't worry. I will definitely give you an explanation. Tingyu had not been the leader of the female servants for so many years for nothing. She immediately turned around and looked at Tingyu sternly. Tingyu, you're not allowed to eat today. Chop all the firewood in the backyard. And you're not allowed to sleep until you're done. Hurry up and go. Yes, I'll go to big sister Tingyu right now. Tingyu answered quickly, turned around and ran out quickly. Alright, I've already punished her, so let's not be calculative, okay? After all, that child has just entered the Earl's residence and doesn't know anything. Give her a chance to correct herself. The woman wanted to say something, but a slender little hand reached out from the side and grabbed her hand, shaking her head at her. In fact, that Tingyu didn't say anything wrong. Although the maids seemed to have infinite glory, as long as they took a wrong step, they would die. In the end, no matter how glorious a servant was, they were still a servant. As long as they couldn't be masters, they had to live under the whims and wrongs of others. The other maids were also pale. How could they not think of what Lamia could think of? It was because they thought of it that they were so angry at Chris. Chris also knew that she had said something wrong this time, so she could only apologize dejectedly and didn't dare to speak carelessly. In the end, whether the butler stepped down or not, it was too easy to kill a little maid like her. It was all because she was too angry just now that she spoke carelessly. It was all that servant's fault. If there was a chance, she would definitely teach that servant called Tingyu a lesson. Tingyu didn't know that she had been targeted by a narrow-minded woman called Chris. She was still chopping wood in the backyard. There was a large woodshed in the backyard of the Count's residence. Tingyu was chopping wood here. Tingyu had learned swordsmanship since she was a child. Her physique was excellent. If it weren't for the fact that she had to hide her identity and was afraid of being targeted, she would have already used Do Chi to chop the wood. Chapter 445. There was a large firewood shed in the backyard of the Earl's mansion. Tingyu was chopping firewood here. Tingyu had been learning swordsmanship since she was a child. Her physique was excellent. If it wasn't for the fact that she had to hide her identity, she would have used her do chi to chop all the firewood. Fengwu walked over to help Tingyu chop the firewood. The two of them chopped for more than an hour before they finished chopping all the firewood. After returning to the room, the other two maids who were originally sitting together and talking with them immediately dispersed when they saw them coming in. They returned to their own beds and sat down, ignoring the two of them. Tingyu was originally different from them. This time, she entered the Earl's mansion to complete the task and get the reward. Of course, she didn't care about how these maids looked at her. The four girls in the room were divided into two groups. Fengwu and Tingyu were in one group, and the other two girls were in another group. For Tingyu, the girl who caused trouble on the first day, the other two girls kept a respectful distance. They didn't want to get into trouble because of Tingyu. The first night passed in such a tense and awkward atmosphere. The next day, the four newcomers began to arrange their work. Fengwu was arranged to do the cleaning work. She was mainly responsible for the area on the second floor. Tingyu was arranged to help in the kitchen. She was mainly responsible for doing chores in the kitchen. She would do whatever was needed. The other two girls were arranged to do the cleaning work in the backyard. Cleaning the backyard wasn't heavy work. Every day, they just had to pay attention to scattering the fallen leaves. After the work was assigned, they all thought that Tingyu would be arranged to do heavy work. They didn't expect that there was no special arrangement. This made the other two girls in the same room a little surprised. They thought that the maids would do something to make Tingyu suffer. They didn't expect that nothing would happen. Could it be that the maids were really so generous that they didn't intend to care about Tingyu's mistakes? Obviously, they thought too highly of the maid's character. They were usually very well regarded among the servants in the Earl's mansion. How could they allow a servant to give them face? Sure enough, in the next few days, the maids took turns to look for trouble in the kitchen. Every time they came, they would ask Tingyu to do this or that, and then deliberately make trouble for Tingyu to punish Tingyu. Tingyu, who was constantly being looked for trouble, didn't have time to inquire about any information. She could only desperately suppress her temper and not let their identities be discovered. Tingyu was being watched. Only Tingfeng, Pei Qing, and Fengwu could find out information about the Earl's wife. Because Pei Qing was a man, it wasn't easy for them to inquire about the Earl's wife. Therefore, they mainly put the pressure on Fengwu. Fengwu was not a person who was good at socializing. Originally, they mainly put their hopes on Tingyu. They didn't expect that Tingyu would attract so much attention before they started to act. If they wanted her to inquire about information, not only would she not succeed, but she would also be noticed by people with ulterior motives. As a new maid, Fengwu couldn't work near the master's room. She could only clean some guest rooms and corridors. It had been 3 days since the three of them entered the Earl's mansion, but they didn't find anything. They didn't even see the appearance of Earl Nicholas and his wife. The couple was locked in their room all day. No one knew what they were doing in the room. They heard that the Earl's wife would occasionally come out to give some instructions, but Fengwu didn't see the legendary Earl's wife even once. Fengwu only had 10 days before she had to go back to participate in the individual competition. Her time was very tight. Therefore, Fengwu was quite diligent in investigating the Earl's wife. How did she work so hard? Let's take a look now. Scene 1. Why are you here? This is the floor where the Earl and his wife live. No one is allowed to come up without being summoned. Why are you here? A maid stopped Fengwu and said with a vigilant face, Big sister Tingli asked me to come to the 4th floor to clean. Fengwu said with a serious face as she carried a bucket and a rag. This is the 5th floor. The 4th floor is below. The maid pointed downstairs and said angrily, Oh. Fengwu nodded and went downstairs with the bucket. The plan to sneak into the Earl's couple's room, pretending to be a cleaner, failed. Scene 2. The Earl's wife didn't say that he wanted to eat pastries. Who told you to bring them up without permission? The maid stopped Fengwu and questioned. The kitchen just made some pastries. The Earl's wife asked me to bring them over for the Earl to try, Fengwu said with a poker face. The Earl's wife asked you to bring them over? Eat them and let me see. The maid looked at Fengwu suspiciously. Fengwu didn't say anything and ate one with relish. After a while the plate was empty. Maid. Fengwu, it's delicious. The plan to get close to the target, by pretending to deliver pastries, failed. Scene 3. Scene 4. Fengwu tried very hard to make all kinds of tastings, but unfortunately it was useless. She couldn't enter the 5th floor. The 5th floor was already guarded by the Earl's wife and the Earl's confidants. Fengwu thought of many ways, but there was no way to see the two people. Fortunately, there was always a way out. On the 4th day, Fengwu was cleaning the corridor when she saw a young but beautiful woman surrounded by a group of maids coming over. Fengwu didn't know the identity of the woman. When she saw the person coming over, she didn't know how to salute. How dare you not salute when you see the Earl's wife? Lamia, as one of the Earl's more useful maids, immediately shouted at Fengwu. This was the Earl's wife. Fengwu was a little surprised, but then she obediently saluted and retreated to the side. Well, Lamia, don't scare her. Come, don't be afraid. Tell this Earl's wife your name. The Earl's wife said kindly. My name is Fengwu. Fengwu lowered her head, making people unable to see her thoughts. That's a good name. And you look good. It's rare to see such a beautiful girl among the servants, the Earl's wife praised. Although the servants were all young and good-looking women, there were several levels of beauty. Fengwu's appearance was definitely a rare beauty among the servants. After praising Fengwu, the Countess left with a group of maids. Fengwu, however, looked in the direction the Countess left with a thoughtful look on her face. In the evening, in the Earl's wife and the Earl's room, the Earl's wife sat quietly in front of the dressing table and combed her hair. She stroked her smooth skin, and a smile appeared on her face. Atlantis. On the big bed, a haggard man called out the name with some difficulty. Dear Nicholas, are you feeling unwell? Atlantis, the Earl's wife, asked with a tender expression. I'm fine, Atlantis. Where did you go just now? Why didn't you accompany me? Dear, I don't want to leave you for a moment. Nicholas's eyes were overflowing with affection. I won't leave you. We will be together forever, forever. Atlantis promised with a smile. Chapter 446. After Count Nicholas had fallen asleep, a sudden breeze lifted the curtains, and a voluptuous and beautiful woman appeared in the room. The woman was wearing a cloak and a gorgeous dress. She looked so beautiful. It was as if she could make all the men die for her with just one look. Atlanta, do you have a new target? The woman smiled. She was not worried that Count Nicholas would find out. That's right. It's a new servant. She's young and beautiful. Her body is full of vitality. As long as I absorb her blood, I can last a little longer and spend more time with my beloved Nicholas. Atlanti looked at the man she loved most tenderly. For this man, she would not hesitate to sell her soul to the devil. I like women like you. In order to achieve your goal, you don't care about anything else. But don't forget that I helped you get the man you love, and you haven't finished what you promised me. The woman played with her jade-like fingers and said carelessly, Don't worry, I'll do what I promised. I won't go back on my word. Atlanta poured herself a glass of red wine and tasted it carefully. Okay, I'll wait for your good news. The woman smiled with satisfaction. She turned into a bat and flew into the night sky. After the woman left, Atlant walked to the bed and slept next to Nicholas. She was originally a noble lady, but fate had turned her from a noble to a commoner. She thought that was her fate, until one day she saw the handsome and rich Count Nicolaus. She was not good-looking since she was young, so her family did not like her. So another beautiful daughter of the side family replaced her. She was sent out of the family to fend for herself. She had been looked down upon since she was young. She wanted to have a beautiful face and perfect love. Nicholas was the only one who did not care about her appearance, and still reached out to her. She would always remember that day. She was surrounded by a group of bad people, and was almost raped and killed. Those people were sent by the girl who replaced her. That girl was afraid that her parents would change their minds and take her back. So she wanted to find these people to destroy her, so that she could never be recognized again. In fact, she was overthinking things. No one knew better than her, the daughter. What her parents were most concerned about was their reputation, not their daughter. That girl's actions were completely unnecessary. Fortunately, those people did not succeed. She was saved. She fell in love with the man who saved her at first sight. But she was not beautiful, and could never make Nicholas like her. Just when she was in so much pain that she wanted to die, that woman appeared. That woman told her that she could fulfill her dream. But in return, she had to pay a certain price. She didn't care about paying any price. As long as she could fulfill her dream, she didn't care about anything. The woman made her drink a drop of her blood. When she woke up again, she found that she had become a peerless beauty. However, her beauty was not permanent. She had to drink the blood of young and beautiful women regularly in order to maintain her beauty and not change. The first girl's blood she drank was the girl who took away her identity. She would always remember that girl's disbelief and horror before she died. After receiving that woman's blood, she not only became beautiful, but also had power that ordinary people did not have. She tasted the satisfaction that power brought. She liked the feeling of being full of power. Her appearance became incomparably beautiful. Any man who saw her would be moved by her. But those men were not the ones she loved. Thus she transformed into a commoner orphan girl. After meeting Nicholas by chance, she successfully made Nicholas fall in love with her and marry no one else but her. Just when she thought that they would be happier and happier, Nicholas's body began to have problems. He became weaker and weaker, and his handsome face became haggard. But she still loved him. No matter what he became, she would love him. She knew that Nicholas's change must have something to do with her, so she questioned the woman who changed her. He didn't expect that the woman would admit it so easily. That woman told him that her body had been modified, and that ordinary people couldn't withstand the blood aura in her body. If it wasn't for the fact that Nicholas had practiced Do Chi since he was young, and that his strength wasn't low, he would have already died because of her intimacy. The only way to save Nicholas was for her to leave this man forever. But she was reluctant. She didn't want to leave the man she had loved for so long. If she was really going to die, she would die with him. After death, they would continue to be a loving couple. Regardless of life or death, she, Atlantis, would always be with this man. They loved each other so much that they should not be separated. No one should think about separating them. No one should think about. Fengwu didn't know that she didn't need to inquire about the Countess Atlantis. Atlantis was already thinking about her. The next day, Lamia found Fengwu and asked her to go to the Countess's room, saying that the Countess was looking for her. Lamia didn't take Fengwu up the servants' stairs, but went upstairs through another secret passage. Fengwu quietly asked Bao Bao to tell Pei Qing and the others. Since Fengwu disguised herself as a maid, Bao Bao had been hiding in Fengwu's sleeve, not daring to come out. After hiding for so many days, Bao Bao was already angry and immediately flew away to report. Before flying away, Bao Bao remembered the way. Regarding Lamia's words about taking Fengwu to the Countess's room, Bao Bao was skeptical. Bao Bao flew very fast. Lamia was just an ordinary person, so naturally, she couldn't discover Bao Bao's existence. Bao Bao left very smoothly and was not discovered by her at all. Fengwu followed Lamia forward. Along the way, they turned many corners and finally came to a stone door. This stone door is not closed tightly. A faint red light can be seen from the crack of the door. The Countess is inside. You can go in by yourself. Lamia hinted with her eyes and then said. Fengwu nodded and opened the door without saying anything. Fengwu had just opened the door and stepped out when she found that Lamia wanted to push her. Fengwu could easily avoid it, but Pei Qing said that she couldn't let people discover her identity, so she didn't hide. Fengwu didn't avoid it. Lamia easily pushed Fengwu in, and then with a bang, the stone door was closed. Chapter 447. Fengwu didn't dodge, and was easily pushed into the stone room by Lamia. Then, the door of the stone room closed behind her with a bang. Fengwu staggered and was almost pushed down. After standing still, she saw the scene in the stone room. This stone room was obviously used for shady and evil deeds. In this room, There were several women tied to wooden stakes. Their gender could only be identified by the length of their clothes and hair. The blood of these women had been sucked dry, and they had already turned into dried corpses. When they died, their eyes were wide open, and their mouths were wide open. Their eyes were still filled with fear and despair. It was completely possible to imagine how frightened they were before they died. Through the clothes they were wearing, Fengwu could see that these women were the maids and servants of the Earl's mansion at a glance. Fengwu thought of the news she got from the old lady. Recently, many girls had disappeared in the Earl's mansion. Although the missing people were servants with no background, few people would care about whether a servant was missing or dead. In addition, the steward and Madame Atlantis deliberately concealed the truth. Not many people knew the truth. Many people only thought that those missing people had received some kind of grace from Madame Atlantis and returned to their hometown. A few smart people didn't dare to talk about it even if they found something. The huge difference in status made them not dare to participate in these things. Fengwu walked towards the corpses of the girls. In addition to these girls' corpses, there was only a chair covered with animal skin in the room. Fengwu looked at these dead girls. Around these corpses, several female undead spirits were floating in the stone room, with a look of despair. Go quickly, Madame Atlantis is not a good person. She will kill you. Leave here, run away. Leave quickly, leave while you still have time. Fengwu could clearly hear their voices. These dead girls were trying to persuade Fengwu to escape quickly. They also knew that what they were doing was useless. Except for the necromancer, no one could see what a soul looked like. However, they were just small spiritual bodies and had no offensive power. They couldn't reveal Madame Atlantis' true face in front of everyone. Fengwu was about to say something when she heard the sound of the stone door opening. This time, the sound did not come from behind her, but from the front. The stone wall in front of her suddenly split open to reveal a small door. As soon as the door opened, a beautiful woman walked in from behind the door. Behind the woman was a long flight of stairs. It seemed that this staircase would lead directly to the room on the 5th floor. Madame Atlantis. Fengwu recognized her at a glance. She was the Countess Atlantis. Tonight, Madame Atlantis was very different from her usual dignified appearance. She was wearing a red dress, and her snow-white skin looked even whiter. She also had a coquettish makeup on her face. She looked very different from her dignified and beautiful appearance during the day. Atlant walked out of the stone door and slowly sat on the only chair in the stone room. You're so beautiful. Your skin is so good. More importantly, you have a huge amount of life energy. It's really fascinating. Atlantis licked her lips and looked at Fengwu, as if she was looking at delicious food. You want to suck my blood? To Atlantis' surprise, Fengwu didn't scream in fear, nor did she beg for mercy. Her reaction made Atlantis realize that something was wrong. Very smart. It seems that you've discovered my intentions. Atlantis giggled. Why do you want to suck their blood? Fengwu could see the thick blood energy on Atlantis' body. Ordinary people couldn't sense such a thick blood energy. Even magicians rarely noticed that something was wrong. If it wasn't for Fengwu's extraordinary eyes, she wouldn't have noticed the problem. Since the first time she met Madame Atlantis, Fengwu had already discovered that Madame Atlantis might not be a human, just as the Countess had said. It was impossible for a human to have such a strong blood energy. Even a person who killed people like Scything Flax wouldn't have such an aura. She didn't know much about spirits. This made Fengwu think of a person or a spirit that understood. Perhaps she should call Liddy over to take a look. Thinking about it, she hadn't seen Liddy for a while. If it wasn't for Madame Atlantis' appearance, Fengwu would have almost forgotten that she had a contract spirit Liddy. It seems that I accidentally let a little mouse in this time. Was it that damned old hag who let it in to investigate me? That old hag still hasn't given up. I thought that she would give up after investigating me so many times. Unexpectedly, she's getting smarter and smarter. She even knew to find a bait to lure me in. After discovering that there was something wrong with Fengwu, Madame Atlantis could only think of one person who would do such a thing. The Countess. That damned old hag. If it weren't for the fact that she was Nicholas' mother, Madame Atlantis would have killed her long ago. How could she have let that old hag live until now? Madame Atlantis also secretly hated the Countess. Ever since she and Atlantis lived happily together, she discovered that Nicholas' mother disliked her more and more. She even sent someone to investigate her. Fortunately, Madame Atlantis was smart enough to discover the signs early on. She didn't let the old hag get hold of her weakness. Madame Atlantis didn't give up after testing her so many times, and sent someone in again. Since she wanted to send someone in, so be it. She wouldn't let anyone who discovered her secret live. Fengwu had to die. Old hag, so what if she found out? I'm the only person Nicholas loves the most now. Does she think that Nicholas still cares about her, his mother? Atlantis sneered. She didn't care about the Countess at all. Aren't you a human? Fengwu tilted her head. No matter how she thought about it, she couldn't figure out what Atlantis was. She wasn't interested in the grudge between her and the Countess. Of course I'm a human. Atlantis snapped back to reality from cursing the Countess. She snorted coldly and said indifferently, yes, she was a human but also not a human. In order to obtain beauty and power, she wouldn't hesitate to become a demon. Alright, let's not talk nonsense. Little girl, since you discovered something you shouldn't know, I can't let you live. Huh? Along with a loud shout, sharp black fingernails appeared on Atlantis' 10 fingers. These fingernails carried an eerie coldness and seemed to be filled with murderous intent. Go to hell. Atlantis waved her hands. Her 10 fingers became her strongest weapon. Her movements were extraordinarily fast. Fengwu swung her sword to block, but Atlantis' nails left a shallow dent on her sword. Chapter 448. Fengwu frowned. She didn't expect her nails to be so powerful. Atlantis didn't change her attack. She moved quickly like a ghost. If Fengwu reacted a little slower, she would have been killed by her claws. At the same time, Bao Bao successfully flew out to report the news. Ting Feng and Pei Qing went to help Fengwu take down Madame Atlantis, who had ulterior motives. Ting Yu took the opportunity to go to the 5th floor to see what had happened to Count Nicholas. There were many maids guarding the 5th floor today. No matter how many maids there were, they were still ordinary humans. It was impossible for them to beat Ting Yu, who was a sword master. Zheng Yu's strength was not bad. She didn't feel any pressure when dealing with these maids. She didn't kill them. She just knocked them out and let them have a good rest. After knocking everyone out easily, she opened the door to the master bedroom. There was a big bed in the room. A skinny man was lying on the bed. There were dark circles under the man's eyes. He looked haggard and didn't look like he would live for long. Damn, isn't this too vicious? Ting Yu's background wasn't low. Her mother had a special ability, so she could easily see what happened to the young and promising Count. Count Nicholas, who was famous among the younger generation, was actually affected by an evil charm that had been lost for a long time. She didn't know how the Count fell for it, but she knew that this kind of charm technique was extraordinary. In fact, the charm that Nicholas was affected by was not a real charm. It could only be said to be a fast version. This charm was obviously done with the help of external forces. The charm that was cast by external forces was more harmful to the human body. It was normal for Nicholas to look like he was about to die. To use this kind of seduction technique, one would need the help of a male and female seduction bug. The female seduction bug would allow the host to be reborn, becoming more and more beautiful and charming, making it easy for men to fall in love with her. On the other hand, the male seduction bug's host would wholeheartedly love the female seduction bug's host. A person who had been hit by a male charm bug would not be able to say no to the owner of a female charm bug. He would only love that person until he lost his mind. In short, he would become an idiot who was born for love. Although the charm insect could help a woman get the man she wanted, it wasn't the right way to steal love. When the two charm insects fulfilled the man and woman's love, the male charm insect's host's life force would be continuously absorbed by the charm insect. When the host died, the charm insect would break out of the body and look for the next man to be its host. This charm insect was very rare. A long time ago, there was a woman who wanted to get a man's heart but couldn't. So she turned to learning charm and tried to use it to hook the man's heart. who knew that the woman's talent in charm wasn't good, and she didn't have any high-level charm. So, she had no choice but to use some unknown method to give birth to two charm insects. She found an opportunity to put the male charm insect in the man's food. Then, she ate the male charm insect herself. In the end, just as the woman thought, the two of them fell madly in love. The man was willing to do anything for her. However, the woman's body began to feel uncomfortable. The charm insect gave her a beautiful face, but it also needed to feed the young woman's blood to maintain its beauty. In order to keep her face beautiful forever, the woman began to kill young women to feed the charm insect in her body. Just when the woman thought that the two of them could be happy for the rest of their lives, she suddenly realized that the man's body was getting worse and worse. The life force in his body was decreasing. She tried everything but couldn't stop the man from leaving. In the end, the woman died for love. The story between the two of them made people sigh. The method to refine charm insects was passed down from that time. However, charm insects had been extinct for thousands of years. She didn't expect that there would be someone in this world who knew how to refine them. Using a charm insect to get a man's heart was a sorcery. Those who really knew how to use a charm insect wouldn't bother to use it because it had a lot of side effects. For example, the Saintess of Qingye Kingdom, Shumi, was a famous expert who practiced eyebrow techniques. She was known as the most beautiful woman in the world. It was said that as long as a man saw her, he would fall in love with her involuntarily. Even if a woman didn't fall in love with her, she wouldn't hate her or be jealous of her. In short, as long as they saw her face, they would lose control of their hearts and become her captive. She was a real master of charm. She didn't use a charm insect to make people fall in love with her. Moreover, there were such strong side effects. In the future, she could only keep killing people to provide the charm insect with the blood of young women. If she didn't kill people to suck their blood, she would immediately be eaten by the charm insect. Then not only would she die, but she would also die miserably, because this charm worm was too harmful to both men and women. Apart from those who were truly at their wits' end, no one would be so stupid as to practice this evil charm technique. After sighing at Atlantis' madness, Tingyu began to think about how to save this unlucky Count Nicholas. In fact, Tingyu had completely misunderstood. At first, Atlantis didn't know that her change was related to the charm insect. Later, when she found out, she couldn't stop halfway. Moreover, if she could get the love of her sweetheart, she would rather die. As long as Nicholas could belong to her forever, she could give up anything. So what if they died together? Chapter 449. There's no time to explain. If we wait any longer, this person will really be hopeless. I'm Feng Wu's friend. I'm not a bad person. You just have to believe me. Now please leave first. Phaser frowned slightly as she looked at Count Nicholas, who was obviously gasping for air. This count was considered one of the best of the younger generation. It would be a pity if he died just like that. Tingyu was in a dilemma. Should I trust her? She couldn't be sure if the girl in front of her was a friend or foe. If she was a foe, then handing Count Nicholas over to her would be like sending a lamb to a tiger's den. If she was a friend, then she might be able to find a way to save this unlucky count. Life and death in a single thought really wasn't easy to deal with. Tingyu thought about it again and again. In any case, this count was about to die, so she might as well gamble on this slim chance of survival for him. It's decided then. Tingyu didn't waste any time. She nodded and said, "All right, I'll trust you this time. I hope you really have a way to save Count Nicholas." The reward for saving him would definitely be doubled. Tingyu suddenly felt a little excited at the thought of doubling the reward. With that, she walked out of the room and closed the door behind her in silence. The maids outside had collapsed on the ground. She casually leaned against the door, waiting for the good news. God bless me. I hope I didn't make the wrong decision. Meanwhile, the battle between Atlantis and Fengwu was coming to an end. Atlantis was as fast as lightning, even faster than Fengwu. Although she was faster, her attack power was far inferior to Fengwu's. Fengwu fought with her for a few rounds, and Atlantis began to show signs of defeat. At this time, Tingfu and Pei Qing arrived. They easily subdued Lamia outside the door, and joined Fengwu to deal with Atlantis. With a loud bang, Atlantis was hit by Pei Qing's spatial magic. No matter how fast she couldn't be faster than Pei Qing, who had absolute talent in spatial magic. As long as Pei Qing used his spatial seal, she would not be able to use her speed to dodge the attacks of the three people. Originally, Fengwu was alone, but Atlantis was already on the verge of collapsing. After being attacked by Pei Qing and Tingfeng, she was immediately seriously injured. Just as the three of them were about to continue to subdue her and hand her over to the old madam, Atlantis suddenly let out a shriek that sounded like she was in extreme pain. The three of them looked at each other and couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. The three of them didn't try to kill her, so logically speaking, they shouldn't have caused her such pain. Could this be an act? As soon as the suspicious Pei Qing thought that, he realized that he was wrong. Atlantis fell to the ground and kept twitching. She looked like she had epilepsy. White bubbles flowed out of her mouth, and there was a pink worm mixed in the bubbles. As soon as this insect appeared, it let out a series of miserable insect cries. "Be careful!" Tingfeng roared and flattened the insect that just crawled out of Atlantis' mouth with a stomp. Ah! As soon as the insect died, Atlantis screamed even more miserably. Her facial features began to change rapidly. In less than a minute, she changed from a peerlessly beautiful woman to an ordinary woman with an ordinary appearance. This kind of appearance was not considered beautiful in the Heavenly Wind continent. Not only was she not beautiful, but she couldn't even be considered delicate. It was no wonder that she was so obsessed with beauty. The change in her appearance was just the beginning. Atlantis' hair began to turn white, and it was getting whiter. Not only that, but wrinkles also grew on her face. She looked as if she had aged 50 years in an instant. Fengwu felt that her aura had become much weaker, and was no longer as strong as before. What happened? Pei Qing was puzzled. How could a person suddenly become so old? She must have been eaten by the charm worm. Tingfeng looked at the insect that he had stomped to death with disgust. He really wanted to change into a new pair of shoes immediately. The charm worm's backlash? No way. There's actually someone in this world who knows how to refine an evil creature like the charm worm? Pei Qing was a little surprised. Because the charm worm was too vicious, it had long been listed as an evil technique by Heavenly Wind, and the method to refine the charm worm had long been lost. He had never thought that he would actually be able to see the charm worm in Rain City. Looking at the disgusting corpse of the charm worm, he simply could not imagine how Atlantis had made such a choice. Not only did the charm worm harm others, but it also harmed herself. What kind of deep hatred did this woman have with Count Nicholas, that she would do such a thing to kill him? Moreover, after the charm worm was implanted into a man's body, if it was killed before it could absorb all of the host's life force, then the female charm worm would immediately be eaten by the charm worm. Of course, the host of the female charm worm would also suffer. In this situation, it was obvious that she had been eaten by the charm worm. Now that she had lost all of her life force, she did not have much longer to live. What kind of grudge do you have with Count Nicholas? You're willing to sacrifice yourself just to kill him. Is it worth it? Tingfeng couldn't understand how deep the grudge had to be to make such a decision. Upon hearing this, Atlantis looked at Tingfeng emotionally and shouted, "What nonsense are you talking about? Why would I want to kill Nicholas? I love him so much that I'm willing to die with him. Why would I harm him?" Her voice was no longer as charming as before. Instead, it had become as hoarse as an old lady's. "You love Nicholas? We really couldn't tell." Atlantis had to be joking to use such a cruel method to truly love someone. Fengwu did not know what love was. Mingxi once said that if you loved someone, you would want that person to be happy. You would always think of that person and want to be with that person. Although she did not quite understand it, she knew that love was not harm. If you truly loved someone, you would never harm them. If this is your love for Nicholas, I can only say that this kind of love is really scary. Fortunately, I was lucky enough to not meet a lunatic like you. Pei Qing felt goosebumps all over his body whenever he thought of someone like her, who had used the charm worm to obtain his love. The more he thought about it, the scarier it was. I think so too. Tingfeng nodded in agreement. Fengwu nodded. This kind of love was really scary. She had to go back and tell Mingxi about it. She nodded and thought seriously. What do we know? The Count and I are truly in love. The love between us is not something that people like you can understand. Atlantis suddenly roared. She could endure being defeated, and the pain of the charmworm's backlash, but she could not stand anyone questioning her love for Nicholas. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.